I have no idea where this will lead us, but I have a definite feeling it will be a place both wonderful and strange.
Hello, and welcome to the wonderful and strange Twin Peaks Logcast. I'm Kalil, and with me today is the wheels to my meals.
Now, this is something that I appreciate because in the end, I, the Unplugged Professor, am the most important part. I'm the thing that gets you where you need to go. I'm the thing that gets you from point A to point B in order to supply the goods, if you will. Even if you may be the goods, without me, it'd be nothing.
See, I don't know why it has to be a competition, because you need both. Like, if you just have the wheels, these old people or homebound people are just going to end up with nothing. It's like, hey, we care about you in the community. We decided to stop by. No. Okay, bye. You need the meals, too. You need both of us working in harmony.
Yeah, but I think that the best way to test this is to let us wait like 12 or 20 years for one of us to reply in order to make sure that this is truly the case. Let one of us linger alone for some time and let that simmer. Just like, hey, the missing pieces.
Which is what we're talking about today.
Yes, it is exactly what we are talking about. Now, Kalil, as far as these bits of substance, these little chompable bits.
Morsels.
These morsels of things.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about these things, these missing pieces instead of deleted scenes? It seems to be something that's very much premiered in these little boxes that we call DVDs and Blu-rays.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be made into a little bit more of an event than your average just like deleted scenes packaged into a DVD. I mean, for one, you've got the length. I mean, this is like feature length production. Mm-hmm. These missing pieces are about as long as Fire Walk With Me itself.
Yes. It very much is like a newspaper collage of things and elements that aren't really in the film.
And they've been restored beautifully. Like, sometimes you'll watch a DVD with missing pieces and you can tell they're like not the final draft cut. They're just a little bit rough and a little bit raw. They're not as fine-tuned. These are like clearly things that could have just been in the movie, at least production-wise.
I mean,
they look like the quality.
Yes, we have said time and time again on how much quality is already in some of the remasterings here. And the missing pieces, Fire Walk With Me, no expense was spared, or at least none that I can see.
But the main thing, kind of going back to your question, is the titling of it. I do like that name of Missing Pieces. Mm-hmm. I think it's twofold. One, it acknowledges the sort of mystery element to Fire Walk With Me / Twin Peaks, and that it is a puzzle. Mm-hmm. That there are puzzles. Mm-hmm. However, it also kind of implies this idea that, yeah, you were given an incomplete puzzle last time. Here's a few more pieces. And for some of these, I think that's actually a pretty fair assessment. Given what we see about Annie, given what we see about Cooper, given what we see about Philip Jeffries, it kind of does feel like Fire Walk With Me had some pieces missing. And I could see that being a mark against the original product in some way.
No, I wouldn't mark it myself across it. I think that Fire Walk With Me itself as a product consists with its tone as well as is very good with its pacing. Mm-hmm. It is a very nice finite product of what I would call dread, frustration, sadness, and so on. You know, all my favorite elements. But these missing pieces, they feel like a little bit extra, and I think that might have slowed it down. I don't think I got something incomplete. It's just that someone didn't give me my appetizer.
May I say the C word?
Kalil, I don't think that should be allowed on the podcast.
Canon. Are these Fire Walk With Me missing pieces canon?
I think that all of them are canon. I mean, think that there's only one scene that I think it would be absolutely silly to try to connect inside the canon, but I still do find it canon. I think that these events did happen in their general orders that does flesh out Twin Peaks in general. There are moments in which we get to see a little bit in Twin Peaks. There's points that we get more Twin Peaks in tones, and both these that were fairly absent from Fire Walk With Me itself.
And when we say canon, there's a whole canon of worms that we're opening here, I would say. Because you and I think, are on the same page that something can be canon to an individual even if it's not canon to everyone else.
Yes.
And we both are subscribers to some degree of Death of the Author, that if David Lynch says these aren't canon, that doesn't mean they're not.
Yes.
He can be wrong, quote unquote, if I consider it canon personally. However, there is that problem of, you don't really know if anything later than this is going to rely on any of the missing pieces.
Yes.
So my question for you, a little bit of a spin off the canon question, going into The Return, going into Mark Frost's books, do you think that things that happen in the missing pieces should be taken into account for those later material? Or do you think, those things were left out for like 20 years. We shouldn't do anything with them in the new stuff.
I think that, no, a lot of these fit just nicely. I think that they extend on moments very nicely. I think that these do deserve at least a little bit of acknowledgement. I think that maybe there's even just a larger bias in my head that these aren't just deleted scenes to note on. This is, again, noted as the missing
If it was
pieces.
called deleted scenes, do you think your answer would change a lot?
I think that there's a possibility it would change. But again, I don't live in that reality. I live in this one.
See, and I don't know whose decision it was to call them the missing pieces. I don't know if it was David Lynch, Mark Frost, someone else involved in the project. I don't know.
Now, Kalil, you do know things such as David Lynch a little bit more than me. As far as David Lynch's works, has he ever had a series of deleted scenes not called deleted scenes before?
I know that Inland Empire had a movie-length collection of scenes called More Things That Happened. I haven't checked that one out yet, although I do love Inland Empire. I haven't checked that out yet, and I'm looking forward to it.
That sounds awfully more on the nose than what one could construe from missing pieces.
Yeah, it does raise the question of, does David Lynch consider them canon or not? Which I think we'll see as time goes on if that seems to be the case. So I fully expect that some of these scenes we're going to have a lot to say, and some of these scenes honestly might have taken longer to watch than we actually have things to comment on them.
This is an 8-part podcast this time.
Hopefully this one is not 8 parts. So let's just start off with all of the missing pieces that happen in Deer Meadow and just talk about what those scenes might be doing for Chet Desmond, Sam Stanley, and kind of that characters we only knew for half an hour of the original work.
Yep, let us go to specifically the true title, the place that is known as Deer Meadow, and only Deer Meadow. It's
Correct.
never had any other name.
I can't imagine it having any other name. That'd be ludicrous.
It'd be ludicrous if anyone typed that or anything like that.
So it's 3:30 a.m., and you're leaving the morgue. You've been there for like 11 hours, right? Because like we had the wall clock say 4:30 when Chet Desmond and Sam Stanley left the sheriff's office. And presumably it's not that much of a walk from the sheriff's department to the morgue, which they said was like right out back, I think.
Yeah.
So they've been in there for like 11 hours with this dead body. I don't know how long the average autopsy takes, but like the stuff that we saw with Teresa Banks was maybe like what, 5 to 10, not even 10 minutes, like maybe 5 minutes max, right?
Stretch it on the imagination, I'd say that it was quote unquote half an hour sped up with banter and
But what
dialogue.
were they doing for the 10 and a half then?
They were simply just making sure everything was A-okay with their limited resources. Remember, Sam Stanley has different actions that may be unconventional,
Yeah.
if you will, than the usual person in his position. And I think we'll go a little bit more into that as we go through these pieces.
I mean, Albert would have got that job done in like half the time.
Maybe.
How long did it take on Laura Palmer? It was like a couple hours? Like, come on, he could do this.
Yeah, but at the same time, Doc Hayward was in the way.
Yeah, he
instead
was
of,
rushing
like,
it. He was, you didn't have Doc Hayward here to rush this situation. Say what you want about Sheriff Cable. He doesn't cause you to rush your autopsy the way that Dr. Hayward
No, he just
does.
doesn't want you there.
He just does not want you there. But once you are there, you're good.
Yeah.
You're golden. You lock yourself
No,
up.
not really.
That's not what I meant to say. You lock it up. You don't lock. You know what I mean.
Yeah.
So Sam Stanley walks out. And he's like, "Oh, 3:30. I didn't realize so many hours had passed." And then there's just this silence. Just this silence where nothing is further said. Chet Desmond has no reply. I do take that to be somewhat the film's way of saying, like, if we linger on it, think about it a little bit. It probably matters. So the sense of time passing and not knowing how much time has passed is a recurring thing with Fire Walk with Me and with Twin Peaks in general. We've commented before, time seems to work strange in Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
I take this to be an acknowledgement of that he doesn't really feel like, wait, we were there for 11 hours? It did not feel like that at all. I don't think it's an offhanded remark, just considering everything else we've seen with time.
I mean, Sam Stanley, I think, is a character filled with offhand remarks and just more so picking at pieces that are a little bit extra, and Chet Desmond not really responding to it is sort of that sentiment of just looking him and observing the grand creature known as Sam Stanley, Jurassic Park style.
And just like in Jurassic Park, Chet Desmond has his own M.O.
Wait, who has the M.O.?
I haven't seen Jurassic Park in a long time. Someone has to have their own M.O. in there, right? They have giant dinosaurs on an island.
It's as they say, life finds a way.
So do you take any significance out of the passing remark then of how he has his own MO, and then later on to Cooper, we see Sam Stanley bring it up again. I like that guy. He has his own MO. Why does he keep going back to that own MO thing?
Because it's an important thing. It's his MO. It's the most present thing as far as this character goes. It is something in which Chet Desmond is distinctly Chet Desmond in this work of fiction. In fact, he himself seems like a work of fiction in his own work of fiction for all these fantastical fictional characters.
You want to qualify that a bit more? I'm actually curious what you mean.
He is someone who gets the job done, is someone who seems to be at the lead of his own story, and he is someone who I can see someone looking up to, especially Sam Stanley, who's trying his best to juggle all the bits and information, while Chet Desmond is just like, there it is.
Okay, and that makes him more of a work of fiction.
It's very much a work of fiction, just because it's usually people who end up striding by as if they're the protagonist is a, I find, fictional attribute.
Okay. Interesting. So Cooper also would have that trait.
He does, but in different ways.
Okay. What about Jack? Would you say Jack feels especially fictional, or does he feel very down to earth, grounded? You know a few people like Jack.
This is me. I am here at the night. Don't ask any further questions.
Hap is good and dead. He didn't suffer. It's fine. Moving on.
Yeah, I think that it's funny that we have like this moment in which we're moving on from that information. But if the FBI has been here before and has had a history of being here before during the point where Hap was still alive, it makes you wonder why. I mean, this place seems very connected to the Black Lodge or just aspects of the Black Lodge. So what has changed since then, and why would the FBI be here in the middle of nowhere?
Professor, I'm blanking. Help me out in case the listener's also unsure. When did Jack say the FBI had been there before?
He went along the line saying that they'd been there before in the 50s while Hap was still alive. That was actually the point of dialogue that revealed, where's Hap's in Hap's Diner? Is he a fictional character? No, he existed. He lived. They'd just been there before.
So maybe it ties back into the Dwight D. Eisenhower thing, right?
I don't think that Dwight D. Eisenhower or J. Edgar Hoover or any of these other individuals have been here personally to Deer Meadow.
I'm not saying they personally, but maybe they were sent here on behalf of those individuals. There's just a lot of things happening in the 50s that are brought up, and we have that inclination that Robert Engels supposedly said Fire Walk With Me was going to have a lot of stuff in the 50s around that time.
Seeing as there are currently eyes from the FBI here before and during the present, I can only imagine that maybe Deer Meadow used to be something more like Twin Peaks, a little bit more comforting before something else happened. Or maybe it's always been that way, as Twin Peaks likely has always been a little bit dark itself. Not, again, anything too terribly clear, but certainly suspicious.
Speaking of suspicious, we do see on Jack, he has a pinky finger ring, and it is a black ring.
Yes.
Obsidian of some sorts, perhaps.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you want to do something with that, because I know the pinky ring bothered you a bit when we saw Philip Gerard / Mike, all caps, wearing that ring on his pinky.
He's an old man. A ring can outgrow him, and then he puts it on his pinky. Again, I think that whenever I see a pinky ring, it oftentimes seems to be that someone outgrew a ring and put it on their smallest finger, or they're bad at choosing rings to put on their fingers.
Okay, interesting. Also suspicious, the outside of Haps. I can't remember if we saw it in Fire Walk With Me. If we did, I just didn't pick it up until the missing pieces. But the outside sign of Haps Diner, there's this weird neon clown that's like half of his face is missing where the eye is.
Yep.
And then he's crying tears of green. All the colors seem off on the image.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot really to designate other than just the idea that it is setting up further how much Deer Meadow is in opposition to Twin Peaks as a town, that the symbol for their diner is an unhappy, sad clown who even his colors are wrong, and he's like fading out of existence. Like, this is the most depressing thing you can find.
As opposed to the mascot for the Double R, which is Toad.
Which is the sign that says Twin Peaks Pies or Toad.
I think it's Toad. I'm going with Toad here. Toad is my boy. That sign is not my boy.
And unfortunately, we didn't see any Toad specifically in the missing pieces.
Or in Deer Meadow.
So I don't know if that was that feel like the real missing piece was Toad. That even the missing pieces didn't have. Maybe 20 years from when the missing pieces released, we'll get the Toad cut.
The Toad cut.
The finally been released. Then we have one more scene at Hap's Diner where it's the next morning. There's, again, this idea of how much time has passed is raised, at least to us as an audience, that it's already daytime, bright outside. When last we saw them inside Hap's, it was definitely dark.
Yeah.
They spent a few hours in there.
Yeah.
And when they leave, they say goodbye, although it seems that Sam Stanley's struggling to figure out if it's morning or day or what time of day it is.
No,
again.
there's a lot of fun, confusing things here, especially since it's the end of Irene's shift. And I gotta say, between her reaction here, as well as just Jack looking at Irene and Irene looking back at Jack in the scene prior, it's just kind of makes me wonder on how much they are outright communicating without communicating on these matters.
It is a little ditty about Jack and Irene. I continue to make the reference.
Why?
What do you mean?
Why?
It's
Why
the
do you
song
make
reference.
Why do you have to tell me music?
Because it's code. I'm speaking to you in code, Professor.
Well, clearly Jack and Irene are better at it.
Well, because we have that Chet Desmond remark saying that they should go see the sunrise at Fat Trout Trailer Park, and Sam is like, "Are you speaking in code? What does that mean?" And he's like, "No, I'm speaking
to you
plainly."
I mean, Fat Trout Trailer Park does sound like it should be code.
And again, it's that more idea that Sam Stanley is the kind of guy that will read into every single little thing, and Chet Desmond's like, "No, I just mean it how it sounds." And are we supposed to take that to be the voice of David Lynch and Robert Engels being like, "No, weirdo fan who hypes over every little tiny detail. That is just a sad clown neon sign. That is just a pinky ring finger. There is nothing going on here beside that. All that electricity you see, it's just electricity."
I think I'm going to go for the voice of Chet Desmond because that's the actor who said it. David Lynch did not go onto the screen to tell us this.
What do you mean by that?
He did not walk up straight onto the screen and tell us, hey, this is how it goes. No, Chet Desmond said it verbally.
So
I'm taking it extremely literally is what I'm saying.
So do you believe that we're supposed to read Chet Desmond's line then as Chet Desmond is correct that not everything is going to be code? Sam Stanley mode is not necessarily the best.
I think it either A, is a point of banter between the characters to, again, use that little bit of extra difference between the two of them. B, kind of take a little bit of humor of the situation as they introduce a new plot and scene. C, exactly as you said. Or D, some combination of these three elements. In any case, I just find it to be fun.
Did you have fun with the deleted scene called "This One's Coming from J. Edgar," i.e., the fight with Sheriff Cable? Did you have fun?
It took so long. Like, here's the scene exactly where it's the hardest piece to put together. Because there was a scene in which they are standing all together and they're talking about, like, you're not going to move this body. And he's like, no, here's the thing, blah, 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 ring, ring, blah, blah. And then this scene can fit right afterwards, but it implies that Cable, as well as his cohorts, either took the back door or Teehee ran around the FBI straight towards the little place, the morgue, and just to stand there with their fancy little steel bars and just say, "Roo-hoo, I want to fight." Roo-hoo-hoo.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those scenes where you can't just insert it in normally to what the end product was. I would imagine that this was the original version of the scene. Then they realized we're going to scrap it, so they made an alteration to the script when they shot the scene later, where we got in the final product. I'm going to assume this wasn't meant to be just inserted. Things got rewritten to kind of cover this one up. So when you try to reinsert it, something feels wrong about that.
I think that there's also another instance of that later on, but more so to invoke the general mood of the film. And we'll get to that to a later point. I think that is an apt point. But I also enjoy the Twin Peaksian reality. If it was Teehee run around, I'm going to beat you up.
Well, and the Twin Peaks scene in reality is also interesting in this scene, too, because I remember you remarking as we watched it that this scene between the music having the snapping in it and the way it's shot, it kind of does seem like Twin Peaks visually.
You are stepping back on the camera in which it has every single character in focus with their different antics going on. The snickering and the cheering from the Auntie Lucy, Auntie Andy, just Sam Stanley putting on and off his glasses as the FBI agent stands around, and the two main points of focus getting ready for their outright brawl, putting off their badges, and getting ready to go. No, it absolutely does feel like it. And if it wasn't for probably an extra one or two punches, it probably would fit just in for Twin Peaks. But
it keeps going.
It keeps going and going and going. They need to get every take that they could. And I think it does bring up a good question on Chet Desmond, because the way that the fight goes is that as he's getting things ready, he gets back punched by Cable. And then during this time, it looks like Cable is like a weird snake man as he's just slithering around in place as Chet Desmond keeps like doing jabs, punches, jabs, punches, and he keeps dodging around them. It's questionable on whether or not it's intentional, A, to gauge his reflexes, or B, to boost his ego, because after a few of these jab, punch jabs, they start making direct contact constantly.
I kind of get the feeling that Chet Desmond could have ended this fight immediately. Like, I think Chet Desmond could have knocked this guy out in about, like, a third of the time.
I think that
he drew this fight out, I think, to embarrass him in front of all of his friends.
And I think that helps, especially because as soon as the fight sort of gets to the ending point, after Cable attempts to tackle it, the best blow he could get on him towards the end was just push him into a haystack. Good job, Cable. As he's punched down,
find the Chet Desmond in the haystack.
Chet Desmond picks up a steel bar and just kind of like bends it in front of him just to say, you're not really special.
Right.
This is just a small place, and you're just a big fish in a small pond.
Well, he calls him a little monkey, which I don't know how much we're supposed to read into it, but monkeys are in Fire Walk with Me, so if you want to read into that, you can.
Yeah.
But he calls him a little monkey, just more demeaning attitude. We see Anti-Lucy, Anti-Andy chuckling and finding this humorous until, again, it keeps going, and it's just silence. There's that little bit of music in the background, but it's so subdued that most of the scene is just thuds of hits.
Yep. It's actually kind of humorous on just like the sheer amount of impacts I go through. And eventually, yeah, the demeanor shifts on all three of the characters as Cable becomes floppily feral. I wouldn't say feral because that means that he might be a threat. Floppily feral means that he's an angry, I don't know, cheese stick. He's an angry cheese stick.
That's also a snake.
Meanwhile, his cohorts get a little bit more afraid, and it looks like Chet Desmond is just being like ready to step up. It's like, anyone else? Anyone else? To both Anti-Lucy and Anti-Andy. And it seems that no, they did not want any of that.
If I may go a little bit off the deep end here and praise this scene of what I think it could be doing, there's a few scenes in The Missing Pieces, this being one of them, where I feel like it's Lynch, and again, maybe angles in the writing, who knows, really stressing that this is not your classic Twin Peaks anymore. This is not your mom's Twin Peaks. This is our new David Lynch certified Cannes Film Festival booed Twin Peaks. And I get that sense here because it starts off feeling a bit like Twin Peaks, but as the fight drags on, it's like a soulless version of it where what if you just took what would be an amusing little gag in Twin Peaks but stretched it out awkwardly long so you just have an FBI agent mercilessly beating up this small-town sheriff? And, like, yeah, the sheriff is a jerk, but he's just getting the tar beat out of him by someone who's higher up in the government, and the music is so, like, calm and subdued that it doesn't feel like a upbeat, like, there's a battle going on. It's not even really comedic music. It's just kind of like this subdued background music while you watch these two men fight, and it's just sad. It feels devoid of its energy and life. And
I find it to be very proficient.
And given, thank you, Sam Stanley, and given that other scenes later, Lynch does show that he can make something feel like Twin Peaks again, I feel like it's kind of a deliberate move to be like, hey, what if the things you liked about Twin Peaks were here, but what if we dragged them out to such an uncomfortable degree that you were faced to realize the awkwardness of these moments? It reminds me of, like, the scenes we had in original Twin Peaks with, like, Albert and Doc Hayward fighting over at the morgue. Like, that was played as kind of a comedy bit, but I could easily see the Fire Walk With Me version taking 3 times as long and involving both men being bruised and beaten and bloody, and the whole thing just feel like a sham. Well, and then even just the idea that at the end of the fight, after he's beaten down one local sheriff, he turns to the deputy and the receptionist lady and was like, who's next? Like, he's just this threatening individual looming over. No wonder that the local law enforcement is a little on edge with the FBI coming in here if they come in here and beat them up.
I don't think that would necessarily be any case ever, especially the way that they behave towards them. It wasn't out of fear, but a sense of pride. But yeah, no, Chet Desmond very much breaks down the pride a lot. And it's definitely kind of, not sad, just pitiable. Just pitiable for people such as Sheriff Cable. I pity the man.
And looking back at all these Deer Meadows scenes, I can't say that there's any of them that I really feel like needed to be in Fire Walk with Me. There are going to be some scenes here where I'm going to make a little bit of a case for why I think they would have benefited from being in the movie, or the movie would have benefited from them. But with the Deer Meadows scenes in particular, I already feel like that half-hour chunk we got in Fire Walk with Me was the right amount. I wouldn't want more Deer Meadow in Fire Walk with Me. I think at that point it might become a little imbalanced. It's already weird that a half hour of Laura Palmer's story doesn't have Laura Palmer in it directly. So I feel like adding any more is weird. And the scenes that were kind of added on, I don't know if they gave enough context or information to really sell me on them. I love, and again, with no matter how we feel about the individual scenes, we both love the fact that this has been preserved, it's been restored so beautifully, and it's available. If only it had been available 15 years earlier. But even if we don't want it in the movie, I'm glad the scenes were kept in some form as missing pieces.
Yes. Now, as far as things go, like as far as Deer Meadow goes, we obviously get to see snippets of that. But let's not forget the other little scenery that we get to see that's beyond Twin Peaks itself, and that's just amongst the FBI in general. And one of those people, or should I say, two of those people, 1.5, regardless, we get to see Cooper interacting with Diane. It exists. Like, this connection exists.
It's such a crazy scene. This is such a crazy scene. So Cooper is talking to Diane, or at least we presume is Diane, off screen.
Yeah, because it's...
But we never see anyone or hear a voice calling back to him.
Nope, instead, Cooper is just stretching, moving around, and just kind of like working his body against the door frame. That sounds dirtier than it actually is.
Some door calisthenics.
Yes. And no, he's having an outright dialogue, just sharing these intimate moments with Diane, and just sharing
Okay, now you brought intimate moments. Now it sounds even dirtier.
Yes. Go big or go home. Anyway. No, he shows that he's had a history with Diane, recognizes things with Diane, and it seems they may have a little game with themselves in which they end up having one day a week that Diane will switch up something slightly inside the room and Cooper has to catch it. And no, there seems to be a fair amount of more chemistry with these two characters that we see quote-unquote interacting that I deeply appreciate myself. Just imagining the day-to-day when Cooper's actually in the office.
So I'm going to pick at your brain a little bit here.
Go for it.
My take immediately from seeing this scene is that the idea that we don't see her and we don't hear her reply is playing with the audience about whether she's even there or not. Like, nothing is there to prove one way or the other if there's a human being in that room.
I think that there could be that. I think that's just the general appeal of just like this silent sort of chemistry that they have with one another, in which he can interpret it very easily, is nice, but also the element of what voice would fit Diane, and having no voice at all, I think not only aids for the personal experience for the viewer, just because it can be any voice that they want, but what voice would be good enough to premiere as the Diane voice? I don't know if there is one.
So here's where I come in swinging with my take here. I liked that in the original Twin Peaks, we never saw or heard Diane.
Yeah.
And I like in Fire Walk with Me, we don't see or hear Diane. I don't like the idea of Diane ever being heard or seen. I'm not even sure I want Diane to exist.
How's it going, Cooper?
So
It is good to see you this morning. How are you doing as a person?
So you're compelled to believe then that Diane is in that room.
I am compelled, yes, Diane is in that room.
Do you like the idea of Diane being, like, do you like Fire Walk with Me almost having a scene with Diane there implied then?
I say that Diane is there, and this is a scene with Diane. That is something that I'm not disputing. So, yes, I do enjoy the scene where Diane very much exists, because I do not believe Cooper has an imaginary friend named Diane in the office.
For me, it still goes back to the idea that I like the mystery of it just being an unexplained thing far more than getting context on it. So part of me likes that it's playfully alluding to the idea that she may or may not be there, but then part of me is like, I don't like this scene at all. I kind of, like, years ago when I first watched Fire Walk with Me, I would have been like, yeah, I want to see this scene because I want more knowledge. But now I'm just like, no. Again, sometimes mystery is better than an answer that's boring. And I'm like, I kind of like not knowing if Diane's even a thing at the FBI. Now we have an indication that she might be, and it's like, no, don't tell me that.
I like it because it does display Cooper's working relationships with someone that he can be familiar with, but not necessarily fully professional with. Like he may be with someone like Rosenfeld or with...
someone he can boss around and say that you must make a great pot of coffee.
He has high standards. But there's also, if it wasn't for just the joyous sort of feel that, like, it seems that Cooper is just very filled with levity when he's having this discussion with her.
He's on cloud nine. I mean,
Like-
even he speaks in third person. He says, "Oh yes, another triumph for the dashing Dale Cooper."
Yes, there's almost like a mild sense of flirtation. I think that I both enjoyed in the mindset of just this very playful, large kinship and this friendship between one another. But I also enjoy the matter that this actually does feel like it could be potentially more feeling than I would have gotten with something like Cooper with Annie. Like in this small section of moments, I get the chemistry between Cooper and this unspeaking person.
That's very interesting. I do not see it that way at all, and I don't think there's a way to really to parse that out beyond that. I don't get much chemistry between these two. If anything, I think Cooper comes across as a lot of his negative traits coming out for me.
Okay.
There's that sense of he bosses her around. He's kind of this full of ego. And his obsession with detail is curious. His knowledge that, oh, you moved that clock 12 inches to the left. There's this very particular way about him that's just very strange and off-putting. And the fact that he's replying to literal nothingness replying to him back, it's curious.
It is curious, and I do see that. If it wasn't for the fact that it's specific, he puts it down to the day. So I wonder if it's like a specific game that they play at a specific time. There's B, the way that he presents it is either a sort of like competition between the two of them on what happens with this pot of coffee, or C, it might not even be that. The way that it is spoken is vague enough that it just might be a general idea of a job and just a very blunt form of compliment, if anything. I hope that this kinship is reciprocated and there is somewhat of this passion joined on the other side. And I think that that's going to be heavily set on the viewer, on who Diane becomes to the viewer. For me, again, it's that very like passionate things shared between one another because I can feel that bounce off.
And meanwhile, I struggle with whether, like, one, for sure, I'm glad this isn't in Fire Walk with Me, but I'm also struggling whether I consider this canon or not.
Okay.
But that's a complicated issue for me to parse out.
As far as for me, when it goes to all the missing pieces, like as I mentioned before, all of them to me have their canon. I think that all these can fit nicely into the puzzle. I think that the title is apt enough. So that's where I sort of hold tightly onto these things.
Now, the real question is there more chemistry between Cooper and Diane, Cooper and Annie, or Cooper and Sam Stanley?
Cooper and Diane. Cooper and Diane, easily Cooper and Diane. Because when it comes to Cooper and Stanley, I think we know how this is going to flesh out at the end, judging from episode 1. Don't get Sam Stanley on the case.
Actually, it was the pilot, so it was before episode 1.
Oh, yes, before episode 1. It's
episode 0.
It's the episode 0. You know, the first episode nothing.
I'm so glad I don't have to worry about that anymore in the pod for our confusing titles.
I can't wait until they start working with Roman numerals, but in reverse order for the return.
Yes. Yes. So we get a scene that's titled Stanley's Apartment, although I don't know by looking at it if that's an apartment. I'm not sure where they are.
Sam Stanley, I hope that this is just one of other rooms for an apartment, because if this is Sam Stanley's singular room,
maybe it's a 2-bedroom. Maybe it's a 2-bedroom, and then one of the bedrooms is just this.
Just this, where a jacuzzi happens in the background. All his knickknacks are all collected, and he's got the special machine for the Whitman case to show off to Cooper.
And he's just so eager. Like, Sam Stanley is just so eager to talk to Dale Cooper. He's like, oh, did Gordon show you a woman named Lil? A Blue Rose. Could you explain the Blue Rose thing to me?
Nope.
Oh, man, I really like that Chet Desmond. That is own MO. Mm-hmm. Look, under the fingernail, I found this T. Flash red. Look, zoom.
Yeah, no, I think that showing off that and just showing that Sam Stanley is a type of inventor, because he mentions that the Bureau did not have a machine like it before, and it led to the conclusion of a Whitman case. So a wild sort of absent-minded professor in a very literal sense. It was a very fun element to throw into this.
You talking about yourself now, or are you talking about Chet Desmond?
I'm talking about Chet Desmond.
Sam Stanley, I mean.
I'm talking about Sam Stanley, Chet Desmond. There are characters in this. Anyway, as far as Sam Stanley goes, this character is very, very aloof, and I do adore that with him, especially with the dialogue sort of bouncing off from Cooper. And the amount that he actually does give to the Bureau. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, if you invent something fully that turns from blue to red and does cool things, which I'm still wondering what that does necessarily, it seems that he still has a lot of use and a lot of help to provide, and I do enjoy that highlight. Not to mention, there is a point where he brings up that he did drive the body about 105 miles, and I'm wondering to where. Because, contrary to popular belief, Kalil, between Oregon and
Oregon!
Philadelphia, it's quite a distance. In fact, between Oregon and...
Oregon!
Thank you. And Fargo, North Dakota. Did you want to do that one as him as well?
No,
But he did it. He goes, Fargo, North Dakota. Except not like that. That seemed too rhythmic. Anyway, it's 1,500 miles. So about a tenth of that. That means like it had to be somewhere around like the Oregon, Washington general vicinity they drove this body.
Wherever Sam's apartment is.
Wherever Sam's apartment is.
Did
it his
he
apartment?
put his dead body in the apartment?
I don't know. Is it in the pool? Is it currently percolating in the pool?
Sam.
He finds her answers one way or another.
Oh, no. Yeah, I think of all these scenes, a lot of them feel very minor in terms of what they add. There's only a few that are like, the implications are really, really, really big, that because they sat for 15 years, it's like, whoa, that sucks that people who are into Fire Walk With Me and Twin Peaks missed it. One of the big ones is everything involving Philip Jeffries.
Yeah.
So we get some of Jeffries in Fire Walk With Me, but I mentioned my feeling that I wish I would have gotten more of David Bowie. I wish I would have got more of the character. And I kind of critiqued in the sense that it felt like to me there was just the beginning of something good, but wasn't really allowed to be fleshed out. Maybe because they were planning for another movie afterward. But after Fire Walk With Me didn't do so hot, it got canned. Who knows? This definitely helps a lot with me with Philip Jeffries. Like, I can't say it makes him, like, the most developed character in all of Twin Peaks. No. But I'm grateful for any little bit I get. I also really like the deleted scenes with him because they're just so, like, wackadoodle.
It's wackadoodle, but again, I still give it that Twin Peaks feel and tone. When he's walking through the hotel room and getting his things and just having everything going around in the background, as if there's like something actively going on that's also a little bit on the strange side. I think that is a merit that I usually hold with Twin Peaks, with their, usual just trying to fill the environment with elements that makes it feel more whole instead of like too close and personal,
Yeah, so we end up in Buenos Aires at first.
Yes.
I don't think it ever says it in the scene itself, but the deleted scene is called Buenos Aires, and I'm assuming in the script that's where that is confirmed.
Yeah.
So he is presumably in Argentina, and he is in this hotel. There's like this beautiful harp music playing, which is so musically different from anything else in the entirety of Fire Walk With Me that immediately it takes you to a different place. Also, the color palette being so different, a lot of red and orange hues. Whereas most of this movie is like dark and like blue or yellow. So having this sort of warm tone is very unusual.
Yes.
It's not sickly like most of Fire Walk With Me is. And we have Jeffries walking around with sunglasses. He's staying at what's called the Palm Deluxe. I know that got a little bit of a reaction out of you because Palm Deluxe, Palmer.
Yep. Palmer. Tree.
And you get the first words out of his mouth, do you have a Miss Judy staying here by any chance? So that would indicate the idea that Judy is a corporeal being.
Yeah.
A human being of Earth.
That left a letter behind.
Yes. Or at least, now, to play devil's advocate here, if not literal, it could be code. It could be a code phrase. The phrase, do you have a Miss Judy staying here, is code for, I'm the FBI agent, give me the letter, please. It could be.
Yes.
Whether you read it literal or not. Later on, however, when he visits Gordon Cole, he does say Judy is like very confident about this. He does seem to identify Judy.
The letter is very confident about this. The letter that I received.
Maybe. He seems to regard Judy as a person when he's talking to Gordon Cole.
Yeah, and he seems to be
within the realm of doubt.
And it seems that he's got enough determination that he's on the mission that he quickly walks away past the mysterious man in the shadow of a mirror. Or not a mirror, window.
What are windows if not mirrors?
Windows. They're windows.
They're windows. They're windows. We get a window into an extended version of the convenience store scene. Most of this is the same, so I'm not going to retread old ground. But there are some new bits.
There's new bits inside of it. It's got an overall continuity to the scene. What seems to have happened with this scene and the following scene that deals with Philip Jeffries is that it was just recut and recontextualized.
Which was done very well.
Dream format. I think so as well. But this is just the full, flat-out what happened from point A to point B, even though it seems that there's multiple letters in between A and B all over the place as far as their dialogue goes.
Yeah, and the hard part for me is that I like having more Philip Jeffries, but I don't think I would have liked it as much if my first exposure to Philip Jeffries would have been him at the Buenos Aires hotel. Because I kind of like that the first thing I hear about Philip Jeffries is this sort of frantic Cooper running between the cameras, seeing this David Bowie appear out of the elevator and just freaking out. I liked that was the first impression we got of Philip Jeffries, where if we go by the missing pieces cut, it would appear that the Buenos Aires thing would be first. So I guess my ideal version of this would have started the way Fire Walk With Me does, but I would have wanted to incorporate some of the Buenos Aires things maybe into the visions that we're seeing between the convenience store. I don't know what the right way to do it is, because like both the Missing Pieces version and the Fire Walk With Me version have merits to me, but neither feels like the best version of Philip Jeffries for my viewing. It's like you need to synthesize them in some way to make it just that right. The Three Little Bears, the porridge being just right. But inside the convenience store section, we got a few new things. The arm has a close-up after we see the pole again outside of the Fat Trout trailer park, the electric pole, and he says, "The chrome reflects our image." We have the electricity line is said like it is in the movie, but then we also get a close-up of the face with the needle nose mask.
Yeah.
Horrifying. One of the
seems-
most effective close-ups, I think, in the whole movie.
It seems that they really like fisheye lenses as far as like moments inside this scene goes.
I mean, if you look at yourself reflected in like a hubcap or some sort of chrome, a lot of times it does have that effect.
yeah,
Chrome reflects our image.
that's fine. But overall, I don't want that image to reflect on
I'm
me.
making a point.
You're making a point, like the needle nose.
So I don't know about you, but I really, really enjoy the close-up of the needle nose man.
Yeah.
I kind of wish that had been in there in some way.
Okay.
Just him like screeching and looking all moist in the face. Some
As
face
we all
moistness.
only wish we can see.
What do you make of the line that from pure air we have descended from pure air, going up and down intercourse between the two worlds?
I think that as far as, well, obviously the word pure is definitely a highlight inside of this. Going up and down between two worlds, that's a little bit of a fun idea when you consider things such as either the Black Lodge, Red Room, however you want to word it, phrase it, or imagine it. So it's something that is present, has a sort of bounce to it. Almost as if like waves, like
Thank you.
electric waves,
Thank
sound
you. I was
waves,
hoping you were going to go there.
just bouncing.
Yeah, I was actually really curious, Professor, if you would reach that same conclusion, because I know that you and I had not talked about that particular line or that specific moment of the scene before this podcast. I will admit at this juncture then that kind of looming in the background of a lot of our podcast episodes is the thought in my head about this quite famous video on YouTube by the channel Twin Perfect. And Twin Perfect made a video called Twin Peaks Actually Explained, parenthesis, no really, that is 4 hours and 35 minutes long. It's, at the moment of recording, it's got 1.8 million views.
Good for him.
So when I say it's popular, I mean a lot of our listeners may be familiar with this. And I've hesitated to call it out by name because there are aspects of this video that I very strongly agree with, and then aspects of this video that I very strongly disagree with.
Okay.
But I will not deny at any moment that there was an extreme amount of work and dedication and talent put into this video. So when I say I disagree, I feel like until I've made my own 4-hour video that can compete, I'm not gonna call that out directly.
Okay.
But one of the contributions I would say that video promotes that has percolated in my brain, especially with Fire Walk With Me,
Okay.
is this idea of the waves of the electricity, which is in that video to some degree.
Yes.
Whether he talks about it for 1 minute or 4 hours, I will not tell you.
It's a range.
But I think he's completely spot on, and I think that Fire Walk With Me, especially these missing pieces, hit you over the head with it. Like, once you start looking for the electricity, it's like, okay, this is clearly one of the main things going on in this whole movie. It's too consistent. So when we talk about from the air, they descend, going up and down between the two worlds, to me that's clearly indicating that these lodge spirits in some way either are or are traveling by the electrical currents in the air through like electric wires or sound waves of some degree.
Yes.
That they are traveling through that sort of area.
Okay.
Now, that being said, I have literally no idea what to make of the guy with the stick going animal life. I don't know what animal life is. That one's throwing me for a curveball.
Now, Kalil, I expected you to completely dissect animal life.
That's in my 4-hour video.
That's in your 4-hour
I
video?
don't expect that, please.
I'd say that maybe, if anything, animal life, when I think of animal life, is another form of what some might push towards the idea of purity, something that just acts and behaves as nature intends.
Or, to put it more negatively, it's primal, animalistic, inhuman. It has a sort of instinctual nature that's amoral.
Yeah.
It does not care whether it's killing you or not.
It's hungry.
It hungers.
It hungers.
Because shortly after that, we do get...
Garmonbozia.
We did it. So we have right after that, we have the Garmonbozia in the Formica table. A new line. Bob gets to speak in Fire Walk with Me now. He says, I have the fury of my own momentum.
Yes.
Which I think the most interesting thing about that line is that it immediately precedes the fellow victim line. Mm-hmm. The fellow victim line was kept for Fire Walk with Me.
Yes.
But the I have the fury of my own momentum was cut.
Yep.
So I don't know if we're meant to put these two together. Like, if we go by Fire Walk with Me, there is no fury of my own momentum Bob moment. It kind of looks like he's pointing vaguely in the direction of Bob, but it's still not clear what the grandson, magician, Tremond boy is pointing at. And here, it really makes me think he's talking about something with Bob.
And to retread some ground, for one, we can consider everyone potentially in the lodge, since Laura Palmer and Dale Cooper are present there. One way or another could have potentially been someone else in a past life before the lodge ended up claiming them, or the Red Room claimed them. There's also the idea on whether or not it is Bob, or if it is simply Bob's fury. Because we know that Garmonbozia is purely an emotional thing. It is something which is pain and sorrow put into the form of something of sustenance. So saying that he has his own momentum that either brings in the chow or is the chow itself, it could just be an acknowledgement of what Bob is or does.
Big Sonic Adventure fan.
Yes, absolutely. They do the Sonic adventuring.
And because Chow, the Chow Gardens.
Oh, I don't want to eat those.
You said Chow.
Yeah, Chow, food.
When I think of Chow, I think of those things first.
Not even like the word Chow goodbye? No, okay. Well, I meant
There's
food.
also the vegan cheese replacement. I think it's called Chow. It might be called Cow. I
don't know what
cow.
emotion
Wait,
is.
That would make a lot of sense if it's pronounced cow because it's vegan cheese.
Well, I don't know what emotion vegan cheese is in the Twin Peaks
world.
But
it also doesn't taste like cheese very much.
Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Overall, the cheese is not what it seems. Regardless, we know that overall the sustenance means something important.
Right. So we have this scene, right? We cut back to Jeffries. A lot of it plays out similarly in the FBI office to how it did in Fire Walk with Me.
Yeah.
With some new dialogue. And with the sense that it's not cutting in and out of the reality. So we get, at least in the Missing Pieces version, the idea that Jeffries was physically saying these things to Gordon, Albert, and the may or may not be there Cooper.
No, it seems that he had tried to connect with them and have a conversation with them as they're going back and forth on this little bit of a wild, I'd imagine, tangent of a day where, they're actually trying to help this man who has just appeared after 2 years actually pull up a seat for him and have a full-on conversation. But the words on the outside is just more so concern, and the words on the inside, being from Jeffries, seems to be retreading most steps. Most steps is important.
He does say, he says the line where I haven't got a whole lot to go on. That was in Fire Walk with Me. But then he adds that line, Judy is positive about this.
Yes.
Which indicates the idea that Judy is a person. If not a person, I guess you could imagine an organization or something that could feel a certain way. An entity, I guess, maybe.
Now, just to cover that as well, we have to consider, as Albert Rosenfeld said, I thought we weren't going to talk about
Right, that's
Judy.
what I was just about to bring up, is that the way Albert talks of it, I don't think he knows what Judy is. Albert sounds like he's like, whatever this Judy thing is, I thought we're not going to talk about it. I don't think he has a clue what Judy is, but Gordon Cole does. That's the sense I get from the room.
That might be the case. I didn't get that much sense myself. It just seemed like a classic Albert stab in which I really missed Albert stabbing people.
Oh, no. And we get that line of it was a dream, we live inside of a dream, but now it's more clearly connected to the convenience store.
It's connected maybe from the convenience store. There's still some argument on what it could mean because we live inside of a dream.
Oh, there's still argument, but it's back to back now.
It's
Whereas
back to
before
back.
it kind of was disconnected from the other parts of the narrative.
Oh, yes, because we have him reaching out to Albert and touching what I assume to be either his heart or
Reaching
his
out.
chest.
Touching Albert.
Touching still Albert.
Pose toasties. Crunch, crunch, crunch.
Crunch, crunch, crunch.
See, I've changed it enough that now we don't have to worry about any sort of copyright issues with my singing.
Because it's all a parody. It's a messy, messy parody.
Doesn't have to be good. It's just got to be a parody. Continue.
Speaking of legally passable,
Yes.
the practice of trying to get Jeffries to talk is superseded with the need of mineral water as they're kind of fetching different things, handling different things, and the lights begin sort of flashing in the area.
Before we get to that, though, I really like to believe, though, that the famous Hell God Baby Damn No line,
Yeah.
now that it's said directly after and it's raining Post Toasties, I like to believe that that was Philip Jeffries' opinion of Post Toasties.
Oh.
He hates that cereal.
Oh.
And that when Albert brought up, oh, yeah, it's raining Post Toasties, and it's just the seething anger of Philip Jeffries. Hell God Baby Damn No!
I think I'm going to go with the general...
Mini wheats!
I'm going to go with the general sort of mood of everything, and it's not pointed specifically at cereal.
Also, speaking of Seattle, Philip Jeffries says that he found something in Seattle at Judy's.
Yes.
Which makes Judy's sound like either a location, like, you know, Hap's Diner. That's Judy's Diner over there.
Yeah.
Or, it's a person. Or it's like a location of a base or something.
Yes.
But he went there, supposedly. So that would, if it is a person, it would imply it's someone who lives in Seattle, who he was looking for in Buenos Aires, like playing a cat and mouse chase game of some kind for 2 years.
Thankfully, Seattle's never come up before in Twin Peaks.
Very strange, very strange. And of course, so many things being weird in Seattle, that seemed to be where he sat for hours following and attending the meetings of these lodge spirits.
Yeah.
Washington is a very powerful state, apparently.
I mean, it didn't seem like a Buenos Aires sort of place. I could be wrong, but it didn't seem like a Buenos Aires sort of place after he got the letter while he was in Buenos Aires.
No, he actually says, I found something in Seattle at Judy's, and then there they were, and they sat quietly for hours, and I followed. So it leads pretty heavily to believe that it went from Judy's in Seattle to this lodge situation.
What I'm trying to get at, though, is that how far did he follow? Because we had him seeking out Judy as well as a note from Judy in Buenos Aires. But did he follow them in Seattle to a convenience store? Or how far did he go down this rabbit hole? How far did he follow him after they sort of enticed him with this mystery? He was chasing after Judy for one reason or another. Judy was not there for one reason or another. Did he just go all the way to Buenos Aires just to go all the way back to Judy's apartment? What I'm seeking out here is the odyssey of the timeline.
Yeah, we don't necessarily know of a timeline. I mean, I don't think it's clear one way or the other, because if he's showing up in the office in real time, and this is assuming that Philip Jeffries' corporeal body was in a taxi and then went over to the FBI office and went up the elevator and there he is, then we know this is a man who travels a lot.
Yes.
It wouldn't be that far to believe that he went from Buenos Aires to Seattle to the Philadelphia office.
But is Judy someone who is capable of going all the way to Buenos Aires to leave a note to go all the way to Seattle?
It's like Carmen Sandiego. People can travel.
Judy is Carmen Sandiego. It has been confirmed.
Can't spell Carmen Sandiego without Judy anyway. So anyway, continuing here, Philip Jeffries seems particularly bothered by the ring. He's like groaning and like, oh, like in pain, like hunched over in the chair, repeating ring, the ring. And that's when, like you were saying, they try to get the mineral water and the device starts freaking out. The lights are freaking out and Jeffries is suddenly gone.
Jeffries is gone. Not before he does end up saying something connected to Gordon Cole, who just keeps saying
Mayday, Mayday.
In which February
1989.
Now, Kalil, tell me, what's significant about February 1989 specifically?
So I did a little bit of researching, a little bit click-clack-mooing on the Twin Peaks Wiki. Love the Twin Peaks Wiki. And thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Wiki, for your child.
I mean, it could be Mr. and Mr. Wiki, and adopted the pedia. So
in the script, Jeffries reappeared on 15th February 1989, 1 year after Cooper investigated Chet's disappearance. The release cut states it to be on the 16th of February 1988, So that would appear to me to be an error because it's going against the script. I don't know where the missing piece was in the communication.
Now,
but something happened there. Then when we get the missing pieces now, we have the sense that this was after Cooper's investigation, and a piece of Twin Peaks material that we have not yet covered will mention the idea of 1989 for being the reappearance of Philip Jeffries, but not give the specific day or month.
Now, I'm just making sure, Kalil, and just kind of keeping this inside of context. Why is it matter on where they're at that moment? Do you think that he's saying right now it is February 1989, and that's his acknowledgement? Because for me, I'm thinking someone connected to the Black Lodge, little bits of information is being fed into his brain, and suddenly it's almost as if an idea or vision comes to mind. Because I do not believe that February 1989 is where consistently Philip Jeffries is present inside of that space, is present in his trip to Buenos Aires, and then is also present checking out things with Judy. Like, again, the timeline of him is so odd that I just wonder if he just knows something is going to happen then.
Well, and something does happen then, because later that same month is when Laura Palmer is killed. Mm-hmm. So if we take the timeline into consideration, he could be referring to sort of a knowing that February 1989 is a big time, almost confluence, or something about that is very specifically ominous. It could be Laura. Mm-hmm. It could be what's happening right now, but there's something going on in February 1989. Mm-hmm. I am currently led to believe it is more his realization of this is when and where he is.
Okay.
Because I look at Philip Jeffries and I'm like, this is a man who doesn't know what's going on. Like, I think he's so lost at this point that he's just like, what? Wait, this is February 1989. So I almost get the sense of he's just trying to wrap his little mind right now. Not little, I don't mean to be mean. His big juicy mind around the context of what year it even is.
I think that then I would just kind of give it more credence if it was like 1989, he just said the year alone. But the fact that he's so jumbled in the way that he speaks and he doesn't really know exactly where or how he is, and what happens to him immediately after,
yes.
I think that there's just heavy amounts of Lodge influence going on with him. I do feel that there is something in which it's not him realizing anything, it's just visions are coming to him Sarah Palmer style.
Yeah, we exit through Bob's mouth in the transition, which is always ominous. Mm-hmm. And we see Philip Jeffries, what almost looks like he's burned through the wall.
Yeah, no, he somehow has appeared, like, and there is some residue Back to the Future style left onto the wall.
He's bleeding from the mouth. He's clearly, like, in agony. Like, this caused, like, some pain to his body.
Yeah.
And he's reaching toward these people back, it looks like, in the Buenos Aires hotel area.
Yeah, it looks like the maid is, like, crawling away while one of the attendants is sort of standing there. So that's a dialogue that just kind of makes me wince, and then, which is, he defecated himself.
Yeah, it feels a little bit tasteless.
Yeah.
And it's oddly lowbrow. Like, I'm not opposed to the idea of lowbrow humor, and I'm not going to try to cancel this particular remark. But it does seem to play a little bit off of kind of making fun of the character and the actor who is not speaking English as their first language. Mm-hmm. So having him kind of mutter in non-fluent English that he's, crapped himself, it just feels especially kind of, not really that interesting. Mm-hmm. I'm much more interested in the thing he says after this. He says, Santa Maria, where did you go? And then the subtitles on the Z-A collection, and I believe most other sources that export this film, so like probably Criterion, I could double check sometime. It says in the subtitles, "Are you the man? Are you the man?" But I was reading on the Twin Peaks.
Snake is the man, though.
Snake is the man, so clearly he's not. Isn't it Mike is the man?
It's the same thing.
Okay.
It's the same thing.
I'm just very particular about these things. But the Twin Peaks Wiki instead says it's actually meant to be ayudame, which is meaning help. It's Spanish for help.
Now,
I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but are you the man, ayudame, the way it's said, I could hear both.
Yeah.
I could definitely hear both. I didn't question the subtitles until I read that it was incorrect.
Now, this scene is very much a lot to chew on, especially with that overall dialogue. I'm sure that some people have certain preferences on where they want to interpret the dialogue. Mm-hmm. I think that this is going back to me going crazy because I want to deconstruct this timeline. He's appearing and disappearing maybe in his own past, present, and future, or lack thereof of future. But that man says, wait, where did you go? As if to say that he was just there. He was presently there and then disappeared, and then suddenly this likely happened to make up for the continuity of this man's statement and the directions he's generally facing. The events that happened that he observed that likely may have been his entry into the Black Lodge, we are assuming is in Seattle because that's where Judy's apartment is. But at that same time...
If it's an apartment.
If it is an apartment.
He just said at Judy's.
At Judy's, where whatever living situation Judy has. Regardless, two very separate locations and a very interesting event at both general areas, if we are to assume both are the same. So where is Philip Jeffries in his own sense of life? That is a fascinating thing to chew on, and I really want to get more deep into that sometime.
Do you think there's enough to go on to get deep into it?
I think that there's always enough to get deep into when you're as crazy as I am.
I mean, at what point, though, are you just going to run out of evidence? There's only two different versions of the scenes with Philip Jeffries. There's no more content we've had so far, at least, that's going to answer you.
I think that there's still enough to play around with that might not be something that will convince everyone, but I do believe that even with a singular piece of evidence, you can absolutely draw out a fantastical narrative depending on how you flip it.
Nothing you can necessarily concretely prove, though.
Yes.
More of a headcanon.
I don't think that I can concretely prove anything in Twin Peaks, really, except for the people...
You know what I mean, though.
Laura Palmer died, but at the same time, she's there in the Black Lodge. I know
there
what you
are some
mean,
things that have
but I think
clear...
that there's so much malleable with the general series that I don't think I can concretely prove anything.
Okay. One thing I think is interesting to consider as well is that it does feel like Philip Jeffries got the much worse version of what happened to our good friend Major Briggs, because Major Briggs disappeared in the woods and then a few days later just showed up at his house. He was confused. He looked like he was wearing like retro plane gear and was confused when it was and where it was. But he was back home rather quickly and got to go back to his life.
Yeah.
Whereas Philip Jeffries has been in and out of time reality for what seems like 2 years probably. So it seems like there's a possible good case scenario and a worst case scenario, and Philip Jeffries might be what happens when you're not Major Briggs.
Yeah.
Which is, very unfortunate. And I still think there's a case to be made that we never see Philip Gerard in Fire Walk With Me at all. We only see Mike.
Yeah.
And this seems to be one of those cases similarly. I don't have a whole lot to say on this one in particular. We see him reverse lighting some candles, like basically removing the flames with flame. Siphoning the flame out, if you will.
Yep. Fire walk with me, not
it's got a really...
fire, let's start the walk. No, it's friendship with the fire. He's getting the kinship together and getting all that fire all in one place.
It's a really interesting kind of mood. Good ambiance, good aesthetic. If you were invited to one of Mike's parties, I'm sure it'd be a good old time.
Yeah.
But I don't really know where this would have gone in the movie. I really don't know what it would have done for the movie.
I think it does enough inside of it, not only to just show just passing moments when Mike might be out and present with Philip Gerard, but you could play around with fun ideas. Say, for example, if this was done before he ended up chasing out to someone, or if he was getting prepared to try to see what would happen next with his dear old friend Bob. The fact that it's just fire alone and in a place with... I couldn't remember, but I don't think that was really any electricity focused on in the moment. It's likely the most mystical natured thing present in Fire Walk With Me, if I may say.
That's a bold statement.
It is a bold statement, but for a lot of the other horrifying and mysterious, which I would put the convenience store in that category.
What is
one
mystical?
Seems very mystical. Seems very ritualistic.
Okay, in that sense, I agree. Yeah. It's one of the most normal examples of mysticism. This very much feels like we're doing an occult ritual. The only thing that's kind of weird is the backwards element, but lighting a bunch of candles in a circle. Oh, he's just gonna do some weird seance, Ouija board activity or something.
And again, good flex onto the actor who can speak backwards while also lighting some fire while also looking like a sweaty man. trying to get by in the room.
I like to believe that this was all just the actor Al Strobel just brought some candles to the set one day, and
he's got to get into character somehow.
And yeah, this
Kalil.
is his character building exercise. He's kind of a little bit of a method actor, and that's how he gets into the mindset, to feel the one-armed man inside, to feel the inner Mike.
Yeah, no, I think that he generally does feel that he's the one-armed man, seeing as he is a man with one arm. But
the capital letter
Uh-huh.
O-A-M, the capitals.
Yep, you spelled. Good job.
Like the character.
Caricature.
Another heavy-hitting one while we're on the FBI agents and while we're at the general supernatural elements as well.
Yeah.
We have an epilogue.
Yes.
At the very end of the missing pieces. And this is one of the most startling in the sense of there was like a 15-year gap between Fire Walk With Me when the missing pieces were finally released where fans didn't have access to this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of extreme because this is so clearly important for like the ending of Twin Peaks that I don't feel like it would have fit Fire Walk With Me at all. Like I think it'd be really weird to insert this into Fire Walk With Me. But I also think it's crazy that like David Lynch made this, shot this, recorded this, had it all ready to go, and was going to put it in the movie and then just didn't. So fans didn't have this sense of, I wouldn't even call it closure, but maybe a little bit of clarification, which is always a dangerous thing with Twin Peaks. Do you want answers or not?
Yeah.
I don't think this whole scene raises a lot more questions. I think it just clarifies the tone of the ending. Just as bleak as you thought it might have been, essentially. So we have an epilogue where it says some months later, we cut to Glastonbury Grove, where it's the sycamore trees and the pool of water. We see Annie bloody rushed over to the hospital, and the arm is watching Cooper approach him at the table in the Red Room. We get a scene play out that's very similar to one that was kept in Fire Walk With Me, where, the arm asks, "Do you know who I am? I am the arm and I sound like this." Then he does the whooping. But interestingly enough, this one doesn't go to Cooper telling Laura not to take the ring. Instead, it goes to kind of a new version where Cooper says, "Where is the ring?"
And which, by the way, he still does not recognize the arm with that.
Yeah. So if we go with the, is it future, is it past sort of deal, it's like this might be a recurring thing.
Yeah.
That Cooper both has and has not been told already that the arm is this man.
And the fact that like time can be an iffy thing when it comes to the Black Lodge certainly helps Jeffrey's case, or doesn't help.
And I imagine that originally when this was going to be in the movie, I imagine without proof that they would have had both scenes. That we would have had a scene earlier where Cooper is told, "I am the arm, I sound like this, Laura, don't take the ring." And then like an hour later in the ending, we would have had a mirroring moment where "I am the arm, I sound like this, where is the ring, Annie?" I feel like we would have had both scenes mirror each other.
Okay.
Which I think is a really interesting idea if that had been kept.
Okay.
Do you think that they would have chosen to keep both, or do you think it would have just been the one?
Oh, no, it'd be both, absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, it's playing out with, is it past or is it future? No, it's using the past and the future for a big example in that.
We also get Cooper asking, "Where am I and how can I go home?" And the arm very helpfully answers this question. "You are here. Now there is no place to go but home." Ha 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 ha.
And dance.
What do you take that answer to mean? Because that's a pretty critical question that I'm assuming a lot of Twin Peaks fans will be wondering at this time. The good Cooper is stuck in the lodge. How does he get out?
What is home is going to be the key answer to this, because we can go back to Laura Palmer's sort of dialogue with Bobby and how she tells Bobby specifically, "I'm going home, Bobby."
To my nice warm bed.
Yes.
She's going to go to her bed that she's made and lie in it.
Yep, but the thing is that, exactly, she goes off to what could be considered a new home, if you will.
Yeah,
or
you and I are
what
both
home was always
interpreting it to be a
present.
very dark interpretation of home.
Yes. As far as home goes for Cooper, I don't know what his home is, but just like, say, for example, the Occam's razor, like, it might just be that's his home now. The Red Room is his home. Like, there's no
They mean
going
it like
anywhere.
it sounds, it's speaking plainly, that sort of approach.
Yes.
For me, I'm interpreting it currently, and it can always change. As one thing that's very nice about Twin Peaks is that it's easy to constantly reevaluate your ideas.
Yeah.
I'm leaning right now toward the Wizard of Oz approach, that if the lodge spirits are in a dream in some way,
Yeah.
as Philip Jeffries indicated, that this is a riff on There's No Place Like Home. So instead of there's no place like home, there's no place like home, there's no place like home, we get there is no place to go but home. So sort of a weird, all that's left now is this eventual return that may or may not happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting line, especially for the fact that the show would then, or the movie in this case, would sit, who knows what's going to happen until 2017, and will there be a sense of home or not in that? I'll leave to your discretion when the time arrives.
Mm-hmm.
But it is interesting that this no place to go but home. It would be ominous if this would have been in Fire Walk with Me and then sat for, like I said, 20 years. But is it more or less ominous the fact that it wasn't even something that the fans got to see until way later?
Mm-hmm.
So by the time that most people got to see this line, Cooper had been, in a sense, stuck in this lodge for 15 years since Fire Walk with Me. You know what I mean? It kind of takes on a whole extra weird connotation of being perpetually stuck. When it was made, he'd only been stuck for a couple years since Twin Peaks finale, but then more time passed, he just kept getting stuck and stuck by time.
I think the most important part to this is that he is meant to be stuck there for a long time, if not eternally, thanks to the scene earlier on in the Twin Peaks series where Cooper has old man makeup on.
Yeah.
It looks distinctly that he has aged up over time.
Mm-hmm.
So no, Cooper is stuck there for a long time and has always been stuck there, even for the duration of Twin Peaks story, because time does not work the same way in the Red Room.
It's very, very peculiar. In terms of tones of the scene, when the one-armed man says there's no place to go but home, he starts laughing, he starts dancing, the music kicks in, but then a little bit into the music, it suddenly just sort of chugs, slows down, lowers the tempo, and just kind of like dies out. Mm-hmm. It's very abrupt. And it gets a close-up on Cooper's face as it gets overlaid on the chevron and red curtains.
Yeah, no, a haunting view.
And his eyes are very moist. Like, I think it's pretty easy to interpret that as he's tearing up.
You like that word this podcast, don't you? Moist.
Would you describe his eyes as moist?
I would describe his eyes as reflective, if anything.
They're like, look around the rims, the bottom, like, I was going to say lip. That's an eyelid. They're not called eye lips.
The eye lip.
At the bottom of the eyelid, there's like a bit of glistening water texture. He was about to cry. It's so sad. He's like, he knows he's like stuck, but he can't get the tears out fully. It's like the coffee that's not fully runny or fully solid. It's in between.
Yeah.
He's stuck in between the state of crying and numbness.
He's stuck in a lot of ways.
And then we get Annie, who's stuck in a different way because she says the same thing kind of to the nurse, but also to no one in particular.
I don't think it's to the nurse at all. She's just like lying down.
She says the same lines that she said to Laura.
Yeah.
But it's kind of with her eyes just staring glassed over at nothingness.
And the nurse waves over, which is why I say again, it's not to the nurse. She is presently, mentally, and maybe not physically, but at least spiritually present with Laura Palmer, sending the message. And while this nurse is just waving around saying, eh.
If we go by the sound waves, technology, electricity discourse, Annie's become the voicemail of the Black Lodge.
While she has the ring,
Please leave your message after the whooping.
Remember, she takes off the ring, the nurse that is, off of Annie, which I could interpret possibly that's sort of the cutoff point in which, like, nope, that's the end of the call.
Yep.
Transmission has been pulled, and now the ring has been passed on to someone new.
Someone picked up the hook.
Someone picked up the hook.
No, they picked up the phone from the hook.
Yep. Hello, how's it going?
My phone's got I love how so much of our theories hinge on the line, my phone's got a little ring, which is a joke by this sheriff. But it does seem to be kind of important also to, again, dive into things. It's really hard to see our name tag, but the nurse's name is B. Roundtree. We don't have a first name at this point, but Roundtree. My brain goes to
Palmer,
the idea.
Banks.
Well, I'm gonna go even one step further. When I think of a round tree, there's two things I think of. One, I think of the electricity pole because it is a circle of wood post. But then I'm also thinking of the way in which you cut a tree. You have the rings going around in a circle on the inside of the tree that show time passing. And I'm like, crap. Now I have to wrestle with the fact that her name reminds me of the ideas of a tree being cut, rings, and time all in one go. So I do think there's a little bit of tongue-in-cheek nature with the name because there's just too much wordplay with names in this to not focus on it a little bit.
Absolutely. No, but overall, just be glad that she found herself some nice fancy jewelry and be proud that...
Oh, yeah, nothing bad's going to happen to her.
Nothing bad. Absolutely zero bad things. Have you heard of her yet in Twin Peaks? No. So clearly, until we hear bad things, nothing bad has happened.
See, now we're getting to the stage, though, where we don't have anything past this until the return.
We do have a little bit, if you will, just this middling thing.
Smidgen.
As we check in on Cooper one last time, inside of his nice little bedroom, inside of the Great Northern. And that was after he smashes his head against the window.
And this
or
is
not
the part,
window, the mirror. Well, it's a window into another
windows
world.
And mirrors are the same thing.
Yep, window, mirror, same thing.
We've
Are
established
nonsense,
this.
but it makes sense.
Makes sense in a weird way.
But no,
Actually, hold on. You're right, though, because that mirror was a window, because we talked about how Bob was on the side of that glass.
Yep, that's
So
exactly
that-
what I'm getting at.
It was all on purpose.
Halfway through, no, but now it is, yes.
It's been that's a lot of Twin Peaks, I think. Retroactively, it makes sense. Things were used that maybe originally didn't mean anything, but now they do. Like when Cooper looked 25 years older in episode 2, or the International Pilot, I don't think they knew for sure he was going to be trapped in the lodge in the final episode. But now that they've made him trapped in the lodge, it really does recontextualize things. Anyway.
Yes. We get a moment with Cooper staring into that beautiful mirror, into that beautiful face, before Truman rightfully breaks down the door along with Doc Hayward. I can't remember who was pushing more. I'm pretty sure it's Truman. But
If
both
it was
of them,
the chainsaw hands, it would have gone a lot faster.
yes, they break down the door. But in the meantime, almost like a playful child, Cooper immediately lies down on the floor, almost kind of like frame it a certain way. And when he's picked up, whether we believe that this is Cooper or the bad Coop,
I mean,
there
come
is.
on. Professor, there's wiggle
Again?
room, but like...
I am wiggling.
You know that when you hear and look at the way that Kyle MacLachlan is performing, this is a huge difference in character.
This is where I have a point in my argument, though.
Okay, but like, I know you want to be contrarian, but just to clarify,
I'm not
you
wanting-
agree with my basic premise that this is a different type of performance from Kyle MacLachlan.
Different type of performance, yes.
Thank you.
We
That's
get
all
the
we need to
mirror.
make sure we're clear on. You don't think this is normally how Cooper acts.
That's not how Cooper normally acts, but Cooper has been under the influence, if you will, the influence of the Red Lodge, or the Black Lodge, or the Black Room. Either way...
The movie is like clearly funneling you to like toward an understanding, and you're like, no, the good Coop is not in the lodge. The bad Coop is not out here.
No, because
Bob in the mirror, that's a red herring.
As a recap, viewers, because I feel we are getting a little bit too far down another rabbit hole.
I love
believe
Alice in
that
Wonderland.
I believe that the line, the good Coop, can be interpreted very literally, where it is the good Cooper, or it could be the ye old saying of the good Coop.
You still think that's what it is? It's crazy
because
to me.
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
When he's like, Truman gets Cooper up and they get settled, like trying to get things like, okay, what's going on here? And it's like, well, the mirror broke right over there, and the mirror struck me. It struck me as funny, and having that and the look straight at Truman, it struck me as funny, Harry. It's first name basis, looking him straight in the eye, as well as being striking. It feels like there's at least a little bit of Coop trying to reach out to Truman, as this is an anomaly. It's almost as if like looking at him as a form of, trust me, a form of help, just like looking directly at Truman in the eye, but also being very absent in performance. I do believe that there is Cooper inside of there trying to reach out to Truman.
So I'm going to use a really, 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 really dumb comparison.
Okay.
So recently I watched Cruella, and you also watched Cruella.
We both watched Cruella.
You and I. And Cruella, I really like. I really like Cruella. Mm-hmm. And I went a little over the edge on it.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a very long review, and I went insane for about a few days. But one of the things that's striking me as a comparison right now is that regular old Coop that we're used to,
mm-hmm.
he is a Dalmatian with a white coat and some black spots. You see little moments of it where Cooper can be very aggressive. He can be very hostile. There's that line from Jean Reno that continues to haunt, that things used to be simpler before you came here. And Cooper seems to believe that Twin Peaks is this perfect, peaceful place, and yet really it's not. And he puts people he loves in danger. And there's some flaws in Cooper. But overall, you see the starry-eyed idealism of this guy who just wants to talk about trees. And it's hard to paint him as like an outright malevolent figure.
Uh-huh.
He's very childlike in some ways.
Yes.
I think what we see here in the Cooper of the epilogue, in the one that is on the floor bleeding from the face talking to Harry Truman, we see the inversion. We see the Dalmatian that is a black coat with some white dots. And sure, there might be some white dots clawing in the back of his consciousness going, help me, Harry, I'm trapped back here. But you look at that face, you read those eyes, and there's a coldness that we don't normally see in Cooper that I find to be very interesting. Because I don't even think necessarily we saw it fully in the season 2 finale. Because as soon as he smashes his face against the mirror, he goes into chuckle mode, and then it cuts, which I like that was the ending. I'm glad that it ended that way rather than ending on the line of it struck me funny. That laugh was a fantastic way to end that episode. It is so completely despairing to end on that note.
Yeah.
Whereas this whole it struck me as funny, you could be right. There could be a little bit of Cooper in there trying to appeal to Harry, but it's being masked over with this sort of like resolute fierceness that we don't normally see from him.
No.
Especially talking to his friends.
Now, as far as this scene goes, like the scene in its entirety, I think that we do have to ask the one question here.
Yes.
Would this have fit well enough with Fire Walk with Me if we were to place it in to the movie?
That's so hard.
It's a hard question, but I know that you tend to enjoy these questions. So
I
here
do.
you go.
No, I
Playground
love
time.
you asking it. Years ago when I first watched Fire Walk with Me, Cooper being my favorite character, I would have wanted more on him. I still feel like answers can be bad if they're not as good as the mystery, but I was dying to know, how's Annie? I was dying to know what's going to happen with Cooper. So if you would have told me, hey, there's an extra like almost 10 minutes worth of content here that answers those questions in part, and we just didn't include it, and then 15 years later we'll just dump it out there. Obviously it's not like that, but I would have responded with like, no, put that in. I wouldn't have cared if you had to take out Deer Meadow. Like I would have been like, put that in there because my priority was Cooper.
Yes.
Now looking back, my current view that could always change, I feel like Fire Walk with Me is mainly Laura's story. And if we keep adding in things that aren't Laura's story, you do run the risk at a certain point of missing the core message of the movie. Could you have taken out 10 minutes of Deer Meadow and put this in and kept the time run the same? Yes. But I'm also like, where would you put this? Because timeline-wise, it seems like this would have gone like toward the very end.
If not at the end.
It probably would have been this and then go to Laura staring at the light with the angel and the credits rolling.
Yeah.
That would have been so jarringly weird to go from, it struck me as funny, to him putting his hand on Laura's shoulder.
Now, I really do think that this would have been directly at the end from how it's framed,
Yeah.
because it seems like the conversation between the arm as well as Cooper seems like a final encounter situation where they stand and make an epilogue. It feels like prior to the scene with Laura Palmer, like how like Laura Palmer was outright murdered, and that intensity brought in with the slow Garambosia and then led into her seat. I think that those scenes connect so much that I cannot see it being placed anywhere there. Now, Cooper walking out of that room and then meeting with the arm again, and then confusing that timeline, that's why I'm convinced that it's the ending, but it's also the reason I'm convinced that I would not want this in place. I think it fits perfectly as a missing piece, but I think that, as I mentioned before, the pacing of this film and how the overall feel is, I think it ends so strongly that
it
this
needs
would
to
have
end
been
with Laura.
middling. I think that ending it on this makes it more of a Twin Peaks ending than it is a Fire Walk with Me ending.
I agree with you. I think that I don't want to use hyperbole, but I think it needed to end on Laura. I think ending it on any other character would be so bizarre. And that image then of the light on Laura's face and it going to credits right after, mirroring the way it opens, I think that's too perfect to not do. So, I mean, to kind of have a cop-out answer, the ideal situation would have been put this as a missing piece, but release the missing pieces a year or two after the original Fire Walk with Me.
Oh, so you're saying not like 12 to 20 years?
I mean, but that's the real answer, though, is that I want this content to be out there, but I don't want it to take that long.
Yeah, I agree.
And there's only really a couple of scenes in the missing pieces that, again, I don't really know if I would want to consider quote-unquote canon for myself.
Yes. Honestly, when it comes down to it, it just seems like it's possible that that was a Twin Peaks ending, and so they took it out. Similar to how we've taken out so many of the Twin Peaks characters who happen to be present in these overall
Yes.
missing pieces. There are a lot of them.
And a lot of these scenes are the closest we get to Fire Walk with Me feeling like the show, feeling like Twin Peaks. And that to me says that Robert Engels and David Lynch, they could have made Fire Walk with Me feel more like Twin Peaks, and they chose not to.
Yeah, no.
This wasn't like, oh, they don't know how to write Twin Peaks anymore. No, there are scenes in here that straight up could have been in an episode of Twin Peaks and felt at home.
Yeah, no, it's felt like a much more budgeted variant on how fine the overall camera work overall looked throughout it. These new returning characters, if you take out the characters in Twin Peaks, it makes it less Twin Peaks and then makes a more personal story for Laura Palmer.
Yeah.
What my conclusion is at the moment.
Yes. I mean, the only Twin Peaks characters we really see are ones who are directly connected to Laura.
Mm-hmm. And who's more connected to Laura than Del Mibler?
Than
Del that's what
Mibler.
I ask myself every single day.
Del Mibler, everyone's favorite Twin Peaks character, making his much awaited return for the missing pieces.
Yep.
Hey, I'm glad this scene happened because, I mean, Del Mibler, he passed away in 1995.
Yes.
So he was obviously not going to make it for the return. And his character was blown up in a bank probably anyway.
Yeah.
By all accounts, his glasses went flying to a tree across the yard.
Yep.
The yard being a street.
Yep.
So I like that this scene is here. This is definitely one of the most just perplexing in terms of where would this have been put in the movie. Because I'm imagining like a really traumatic, like imagine if this scene would have been right after the fingernail scene at the dinner table.
Yep.
Like, Laura, wash your hands. And then it hard cuts to,
I need a 2x4.
Like,
this is not a 2x4.
I like juxtaposition more than the next guy. But that's too much. So I don't think this would have fit tonally.
Yeah. And
But this was made. This was not just like a scrap storyboard. This got fully shot and
Fully
edited
shot.
and everything with music and just what did it music?
They probably
Maybe
had music.
but it was fully shot.
It was fully shot, and it's not just Del Mibler as the singular role that's famous from Twin Peaks that made the return here. It was also Josie Packard as well as Pete Martell.
Finally, we have a scene that explains what happened to dead Josie. Finally, we understand why she was in the drawer knob. This explains everything.
I mean, it shows that she's working at the mill as previously
As we would have
implied.
probably expected.
Yeah, no, she's working at the mill over with Pete Martell as like this 2x4 problem with Del Mibler's going about. Apparently, the machines cut them in a certain way that it's more so rounded up to 2x4 by about, if I'm remembering right, about 7/16. Which, by the way, the wood he's holding is definitely not a 2x4 unless I've lost all condition of inches. Anyway,
It is funny too because I know that in the Secret Diary it's implied that Josie lies a little bit about how much she understands of English just to kind of like create an image for herself.
Yeah.
I don't think Josie knew what to do in this. I think this was genuine. Like, Pete, you know wood. Pete, please explain this to him.
I don't know if I agree with that sentiment. I do think that she knows well enough, and I do think that she can play dumb at times. I think this was more so of a get someone like the manager to just please take care of this because
but Pete
I cannot
is flexing
convince
his
him.
wood knowledge
He's
here.
flexing his wood knowledge, showing off that, yes, we can get you exactly 2x4 by dimensions, but it will shrink. The wood will be affected by this. It's not classically like that. And he's clever enough to like see like a conclusion to this, sort of just cross his
A
arms
light at the end of the tunnel.
metaphorically. I can't remember if it was physically, but look Del Mibler in the eye and just say, now, when you're working at the bank, is this amount of money worth the same as it was before? And like Del Mibler, something clicks, something real. Galaxy Brain is like, I'm so sorry. That makes perfect. It doesn't make any sense, but it makes sense to Del Mibler.
Man,
and that's all that matters.
I love the fact that the actor like shows that emotion. You can just see the realization in his eyes. So good.
At the same pace as he walks, too.
One of the most mysterious lines in that encounter is that Del Mibler says, "I've already alerted the institution in Philadelphia." What institution?
Well, we know
The
what.
FBI?
The FBI, yes, the FBI knows that the wood does not fit here.
So
I mean, that could fit somehow, but unless they're speaking in very distinct code to one another, that'd be hilarious.
this whole movie's meant to be in code, right, Sam
Yep.
Stanley?
Yep.
So
We do know also that Wyndham Earl had a construction hat on at one point.
ooh, Laura. So, Professor, I'm curious. This scene was, again, fully shot, fully made, and was going to be included in Fire Walk With Me if it hadn't needed to be cut for time.
Yes.
Why do you think David Lynch wanted to include this?
Why David Lynch wanted to include this?
This is guessing intentions of a dead author. And dead author, I mean, don't mean literally dead. I mean, death of the author.
I'm super conspiracy brain myself that I feel that the missing pieces were intended. Like, there were shots inside the movie that were extra, not only for the sake of just, like, keeping them on the side in case they want to just feel it out, but I do believe, in a sense, that there may have been want to make something like the missing pieces. Maybe not in this form per se. Maybe it would have been in some other form. But I do believe with the differences in the feel and the tone that, yes, this fan servicey moment wasn't intended for Fire Walk With Me, but intended for something else. Again, that's just me being crazy. I acknowledge me being crazy. But...
Well, my form of craziness right now is to read into the possible thematic implications of this scene if I take it seriously for a moment.
Okay.
The idea that someone would come up and be like, hey, this thing you gave me, it's not what you said it'd be. It's not quite the way it was promised. And then the guy being like, okay, no, it's not. Things change. Dimensions change. This is not exactly what you thought it was.
We had to make cuts.
That's kind of what I'm getting at, right? Is that it kind of seems like a meta commentary of like, hey, I know you want Twin Peaks back. I know you want that gum you like to come back in style. I'm about to give you something that isn't exactly what you think you're looking for.
Now,
it's going to say Twin Peaks in the cover, but it's going to be just a few inches shorter than what you usually expect.
Now, Kalil, challenge mode. Where would this scene fit in the movie? Where would you put it?
The very end. It's I said earlier that it has to end on Laura. This is the exception. No. If I was actually going to put this in the movie, I would put it in there. It's tough because it'd be nice to put it in really early, but I like the fact that we enter Twin Peaks with the sign and then go directly to Laura Palmer. So we kind of have to start Laura Palmer's story around that 32-minute mark. So I think the Pete scene would probably make sense somewhere in the midst of Laura's story before things get super, super heavy. So definitely before Donna goes with Laura to the power and the glory, because that's when things get to be really, really heavy. So I guess I would have put it pretty early into Laura's story, maybe around the 50-ish minute hour mark, somewhere in there.
Now, for me personally, if I was forced to, under like
a knife gun, a gun blade,
and we're told to place this somewhere in the movie, I think that if the intention was true from what you are implying with this scene, post-credits. I don't know if that was a thing around that time.
Yeah, it'd
be post-credits because you allow like the scene to sink in, but then just something to linger on and just like pop you back out to reality so you can walk amongst the people normally.
What a jarring
unlike
mood
myself.
change. What a jarring mood change from the credits, though.
Yep. It would be.
Yeah.
But that'd be a jarring mood change for a lot of scenes here.
I like the idea of then like it ends on Del Midler's eyes expanding and he's and then it just kind of like fades out into the darkness.
I would like it to be just like more so his eyes expand, then it cuts to black and you just hear the sound of him going, oh.
And then a crackle of electricity.
Now, not worrying about anything on how it fits and how it's scaled off to the side like a 2x4, while we put something that actually does fit as we extend out between Shelley as well as Norma. The Meals on Wheels program, which I gotta say, remember when Laura Palmer was going to be going off with her little painting and ran away from the Meals on Wheels program?
Yes.
We actually do get something conclusive that we talked about on the last pod, and that is, it is Laura Palmer's car that she fully leaves behind.
I'm so glad David Lynch listened to us on our last episode, which hasn't even gone up when we're making this right now.
It's not even like the first thing we were right on. We were right on another thing later on. But this one being that case means Laura Palmer ran home.
Yes.
On foot. Meanwhile, Shelley Johnson checking in with Norma is just like, the food's there, her car's there. Should I just take her car and just deliver the food? Which I'm pretty sure is illegal. But Norma's just at this point is just kind of like done with things. It's just like, yeah, you know what, that's for the best. Get the job done, basically, while Heidi's also bleeding in the background.
So yeah, we get an extended version of this scene that begins fairly normally. It does cut out the parts of the It cuts out the part with the painting, which I think is kind of funny because it makes it seem like Laura just gets this painting out of nowhere and runs off.
Which
I guess to Shelley, it does seem that way.
Yeah, in this stream of consciousness, yeah, poor Shelley. But no, as like Shelley's getting prepped up for that, we do get an appearance. The audience cheers as suddenly bursting through the door is Nadine and Ed. And Nadine runs away.
Because, Nadine and Ed, apparently they were going to go to the Double R, but then Nadine saw that Norma was at the counter.
And just like, nope,
she
I
was
don't want
like,
coffee.
you know what? I really don't want this. And there's a moment where it kind of lingers on, like, Shelley, I think it was, from my notes here.
Yeah, I think Shelley knows a lot more about this situation. And
And I almost think it implies a sense of understanding that Shelley has the experience of being Leo's wife and going with Bobby on the side, but then also being Bobby's secret girlfriend. She knows that Bobby's with Laura.
Yes.
So I think Shelley's in a unique position where she knows both what it's like to be the other woman, but then also to be the woman who's kind of being cheated against. Like, she's in a weird situation.
Yes.
Yeah, that I think she can look at Nadine and kind of, I imagine, sympathize to some degree.
Oh, yeah. And I think that it's also good because we actually get a Nadine and Norma situation where, like, her little mouse traits actually do sort of appear. She compares herself to a little mouse. Before, we just had, like, some strange dialogue between them. But seeing, like, her look at a situation and being like, nope, I'm done, and just run. I like that. I deeply like that.
I think it works. It was a good scene. It was a good moment.
Yep.
I'm still particularly interested in after this point, because when Shelley is being asked to complete the run, there's this extended sequence where Norma says, "There's nobody here anyway."
Yeah.
And then Shelley says, "There's nobody here anyway." And then another pause for a few seconds, and then Norma, "There's no one here." And like that last one's like quieter than the other two as well.
It's so, and it's
Lingering on this absence.
You linger on it, you feel it out, even though like the person who cooks the food has his first line ever, I believe. You still feel like the sense of absence and sadness. And so when like Norma sits down and starts tearing up and crying, it fits.
Well, again, it's like my silly idea of the 2x4 scene and interpreting other scenes we've talked about, that it feels like there's the implied idea that this is the Twin Peaks but it's been drained of life. Like the sheriff being mercilessly destroyed by Chet Desmond. You see the diner, you see the situation normally like, but it's missing
that they have homemade pie, apple pie.
It's missing the vitality, it's missing the people, it's missing the life. And it's just kind of this lingering element of, we're alone, there's no one here. I find that very effective. And then also Shelley kind of, turning to Norma and asking if she's okay and kind of tending for Norma's feelings. Because again, Shelley is shown here to be rather perceptive emotionally of both how Nadine feels, but then also kind of aware of how, Nadine just dragged Ed away, how that's going to make Norma feel.
Yeah. No.
She's very aware of the different emotions around her, which I think puts Shelley in a more mature position than usual, which I like to see as a Shelley fan.
As a Shelley fan. And we also have Ed return back to sit down with Norma inside the booth next to the volcano painting. And
It was a painting or a picture? I think it was a picture. Which it's strange because it matches nothing else in the decor, and I don't think it was random because it was included prominently enough in the shot that it was like fully visible.
We all need this. We all need an erupting volcano or soon to be erupting volcano, such as their relationship between Ed and Norma.
The idea of something below the surface churning and developing, and it's going to eventually blow up. There's a lot you could make of that, not only with the relationship with Norma, Nadine, Edward, etc. But you could also look at the situation with Laura's death being a form of volcano for the town.
Yes.
That so many secrets and lies are about to get blown up out of light into the season.
And we actually do see almost like a little bit of that prequel when Edward does return. And he just like gives these like soft promises and just like is saying like, no, I'm going to be there. Let's go do this thing. And is very pushy on this relationship, which I'm sure Norma wants, but there is like some it seems that Norma is more so embracing the knowledge of what is than Ed is.
I'm sure this must have been quite a mix of feelings for you, Professor, because I remember when we were watching these missing pieces back to back that you had commented that the scene in the diner made you realize how someone could ship romantically Norma and Shelley. And that blew my mind as much as the 2x4 bank analogy blew Delbert's mind.
For how much they are emotionally involved with one another, at times emotionally vulnerable and how they end up being each other's rock at times, I can completely see someone shipping out Norma as well as Shelley. Now, mind you, I don't know how things end up with Leo Johnson post-Spider incident, but if both individuals are more available after their respective others have had their situations dealt with, whether it be prison or spiders, I can see sort of a Thelma and Louise sort of situation where there is a common kinship with one another, and just a genuine fondness for one another. I think it comes in the small bits of dialogue that sort of comes through between the two of them, as well as what I can imagine to be a potentially stronger care. I mean, I do enjoy Ed as well as Norma, but I don't think that I have as much situations where I get to see that shine as much as like small snippets. And I think I end up having more of those between Norma and Shelley from viewing, and that might just be my overall interpretive bias.
I think the reason that's so surprising to me to hear and interesting is that I think a lot of fans, and I include myself in this,
Yes.
view the Norma-Shelley relationship as exclusively maternal.
Yeah.
That it's very much Norma stepping in as almost like a mother-like figure for Shelley's life. And the idea of pairing them romantically then seems so at odds, because it's not most people's inclination to match romance with mother. Usually is not the angle.
It depends on what you're reading or what you're watching.
Do you not get a maternal? Do you get a maternal from it still, or no?
I think that if it leaned more towards Norma, like on the sense of like caring and sharing of one's affections, then I would. But at the same time, I don't get that. I think that there is enough ebb and flow between both Shelley supporting Norma and Norma supporting Shelley.
You know, mothers and daughters can support each other too.
They can support each other, but it's not something which I feel that Shelley looks up to Norma. I think they see eye to eye. I think that they are on an even playing field when it comes to their emotions. I don't think that, say, for example, Norma is a little bit onto that higher end in which Shelley has to look up to.
Yeah, I guess I don't read they definitely have chemistry. Like, they definitely have chemistry, and I really like the scenes where we get to see them together play off each other's strengths as actors and as characters. But for me, the chemistry they have is much more on the friendship and family kinship rather than romantic. And of course, the lines between these are very, very unclear sometimes.
Yeah, it's really dependent on the personal when like, those lines can blur or not.
Right. I also think that Bobby and Shelley are such a power couple, except for the times where they weren't.
I mean, that's the majority of the series.
I don't think it's the majority of the series, but it's an unfortunately large chunk of season 2.
Yeah.
Season 1, they're together. There's Leo as an ominous threat.
Leo is the ominous threat. They're both seeing each other behind the backs of the others, if you will. And it seems that there's multiple times in which Bobby tries to play up angles and is more so focused on selfishness. Now, mind you, he does have his own bits of growth and character arcs throughout. But as far as a relationship between these two, it feels like they are a framed picture of a couple that seems to be together for a while until they can work past their issues, more than it is feeling like they are a couple who are directly fond enough with another. But I think that strongly relies on the amount of antics Bobby is doing in the background.
That's interesting. I don't really know how to respond to that, I guess.
Okay.
I really don't know how to respond to that. I get the genuine sense of connection between Shelley and Bobby.
Okay.
I do think there were some decisions made in the writing of their characters that got a little questionable at some points, but I think when it works, it really does work for me.
Okay.
And I do see their chemistry as being more of a long-term romantic relationship.
Alrighty.
Of note, as kind of a segue opportunity here to something I wanted to bring up with this scene, we do have Bobby, going from Laura, who I think we both agree he has chemistry with and loves, and you see that a lot in the diary and Fire Walk With Me. He almost loves Laura in a selfless kind of way where he's willing to accept the fact that she really doesn't even want him. She wants what he can do for her for the drugs. But he still wants to give Laura everything he can for even just the chance to be around her for a while. There's an unhealthiness to that, but there is still a sense of devotion that it's weird to think that Bobby was seeing Shelley at the same time, but then to go from Laura to Shelley, it draws an implicit connection to at least how Bobby sees these two.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting. And the point I wanted to get across then is that I do think that this diner scene, not the stuff in the truck we're going to get to next, but the diner scene, I kind of wish that had been in Fire Walk with Me, because I think that the idea of lingering over these women in pain over the men in their lives, and the diner you know and love being empty, I think that fits the tone really well. It's one of those scenes that is Twin Peaks characters, but it doesn't feel out of place tonally from Fire Walk with Me. It's not the Del Mibbler 2x4 comedy hour. You know, it's a sense of there's a darkness here. You're waiting for things to come out right. And I think that could have worked. And of all the different scenes here that imply that sense of this is not the Twin Peaks you know and love, this is probably, I think, the one that gets it done the smoothest for me. So I wish this scene had been in here, and you already know where it would have gone because it's just an extended version.
Yes.
So if it would have added like 5 more minutes to the movie, I'd be okay with that. I don't think that would throw out the balance. I think there's enough of a connection between Shelley and Norma's struggles that it works still.
I mean, I would say that if it wasn't for how strong the overall scene with the Tremens, that like it's in that string of consciousness of worry, fear, and fright.
Oh, we keep the Tremens scene, definitely. I wouldn't cut that.
We do keep the Tremens scene, but the thing is, the Tremens scene is shortly after followed by Laura Palmer getting home. I think that having those feelings along the way are strong.
You don't want anything in between.
I don't want anything in between because I think that makes a significant gap on how I feel post-Tremens.
That's a hard sell. Yeah, I think it would really depend on how you dice it.
Yeah.
That's tricky. That is definitely tricky.
It is a tricky thing.
You could maneuver the scenes in such a way that it happens not in the same order, that the stuff with Norma and Nadine and Shelley kind of in the distance watching happens before Laura runs away. But that'd be a different cut. So I don't know. I think there's something you could do there.
Yes.
As you were saying, though, we get Ed and Norma in the truck, and Ed is playing, quote unquote, playing this like portable breathalyzer, like breath tester. Kind of seeing Ed at one of his more lighter moments, which is cool to see.
Yep.
You don't usually see Ed that way.
PBT.
And Norma's saying that Ed is so out of it he can't even like walk straight. Probably they're going to be in this truck for a while, sobering up. And this is where I think one of the most heavy-handed moments comes in terms of the "This is not your Twin Peaks," because they turn on the radio for some easy listening music, and Norma says, "It's so far away." And then the music that they end up putting on, it's literally Twin Peaks music. It's a different version of the opening theme from Fire Walk with Me. So coming in, kind of crackling on the through the air, through the sound waves, through the static, is the Fire Walk with Me theme. And as it's playing, Norma's talking about how beautiful it is. It's me and you, Ed, but you can barely hear us. And it's like, I get it. I get it's almost too heavy-handed for what it's going for. But it is funny to have on the side, though, as a missing piece, because if you're ever in any doubt that maybe we're going off the deep end with our electricity talk, this is so blatant that it's doing this. It literally is playing Twin Peaks music diegetically in Twin Peaks.
It also puts a little bit of perspective inside of both their relations on how they sort of feel in their present moment, and then also juxtapose that with how tragic it sort of ends for the both of them. Like, there's a little bit of caution, a little bit of fear. If only they knew that their fears are very well founded.
Right. Yeah, you really get a different sense of kind of Norma's awareness of the potential futility of their relationship, which seems especially prescient considering where season 2 ended, that it seems like they can't get out of this like Sisyphean relationship nightmare they're in, where, you know, Ed says, "Sweetheart, I think we're so lucky." And Norma, after really thinking it over for some time, says, "I think we're one great big giant mashup."
Yep.
Smash up. Smash Mouth. That, hey, now, they're not all-stars. They'll never get their game on. They'll never go play.
Oh,
the ice is getting pretty thin.
No.
Anyway, my point being that Norma seems to recognize that this is all just a wreck, but she can't like get out of it either. She's almost trapped in that perpetual like soap opera drama. I don't know, just interesting.
It is. But speaking of people who are kind of smashed up inside of some drama, we got to keep an eye out for a certain someone, you know. It seems that the perfect opportunity has come to try to finally get Bernie the Mule.
I was so upset when I saw this missing pieces and it said Bernie the Mule. I'm like, heck yeah, more Bernie content.
Yes, more Bernie content, as in we
More Bernard Renault.
Yep, as in we speak passively about Bernard Renault as we make plans about him in the
I was
background.
so disappointed we didn't get Bernard on the screen. Where's I'm sure the Toad Cut will eventually bring in Bernard more. Find out all about Bernard.
Yes, but we get a little bit of scene with Truman as well as Andy and Hank.
A super Hawk, not Hank, Hawk.
Honk.
Hawk? Anyway, I'm not, no. So apparently it said Joey called in. We're assuming Joey Paulson. Mm-hmm. The legendary Joey Paulson, who also isn't in this scene.
Yes.
Dude, how I would have given for a Bernard Renault Joey Paulson scene? Heck yeah. Mm-hmm. As a missing piece, not in the movie.
Yes.
But Bernie the Mule left Canada about an hour ago, so they're going to stop watching Jacques. They're going to set a trap for Bernie. And Andy points out, he's coming on foot. And there's just this incredibly long, drawn-out pause where Truman's just trying to read into this.
Just like looking straight into his eyes, like, so what you're trying to say is that we're going to have a lot of legwork. And he's like, no, I was actually meaning that he's going to be walking a long way. And then Tank is just looking at this bull situation.
Hawk.
Honk. I don't mean to say honk. His
Hawk.
name is Hawk. Hawk. And Hawk just...
We watched a whole show with Hawk.
and he's amazing.
Well, you keep opening up the wound of Hank. I love Hank. Don't do this to me.
Names are close. Anyway.
As a really quick side note, because I feel like someplace I need to acknowledge this, I talk a lot about Hank. I really like his character. Mm-hmm. I definitely want to think more about his character and what could have been done that I would have wanted to have been done. I think it was a missed opportunity, et cetera, et cetera. I've said this already. But one thing that I noticed recently, I rarely use our Twitter. We're Snake Eye Dreams 1, numeral 1, by the way. You could tweet at us. I don't use it very often to do things with it. But I was looking around and I saw someone tweeting out some information on the 4th of July of year 2021. And someone took snapshots of pages where Peggy Lipton was talking about what had been an extremely unpleasant experience while filming Twin Peaks with the actor for Hank, Chris Mulkey. And I don't know, it wasn't cited in the tweet where, it's literally screenshots of a page. If this isn't a real thing, they went through the effort of printing it on book paper. But I don't know the book that's being discussed here. But it goes through this idea that basically Chris Mulkey in the scene allegedly had been extra physically coercive and aggressive in the scene that hadn't been something that she had been told about and the director didn't know about.
Yeah.
That in order to create what he saw as a very strong response in Norma, in Peggy Lipton's character, he grabbed her face in a very aggressive way that was not something that had been communicated. I just want to state very clearly, for the sake of transparency, that is not okay. I am not a fan of actors going rogue and acting in violent ways against co-actors without clear communication and consent.
Yes.
This is not okay. I will say that doesn't mean I dislike Hank's character. I can separate those things, but I definitely do think that is unfortunate that he did that. And I think that it's also insulting to Peggy Lipton's acting because I think that she is capable of a strong emotional response without needing to be unplanned violence upon her.
Yes.
I don't think she needs to be startled into a good performance. Peggy Lipton can act. So I just want to make sure I clarified that. I know it's kind of a random note for the Fire Walk of Missing Pieces.
It is well appreciated.
I just saw that tweet and I'm like, oh, it's not good.
No, I appreciate it, Kalil. Thank you very much. Close your Twitter. We're doing a podcast right now.
I closed the tweet. I don't even tweet very much. I don't even tweet very much.
But from Hank to Honk to Hawk, we have Hawk looking and assessing the situation, just looking at both Truman as well as Andy, and just kind of says I'll get to it. Just and quickly moves on. At first, I was just thinking this we'll get to it, but no, it's specifically I'll get to it. Almost as if saying that, yeah, I got this. It's Hawk's time.
Hawk is the only one that does any work around there.
Yep, as Truman as well as Andy continue to stare into each other's eyes.
It's a very romantic scene, isn't it? Do you get the chemistry from them you get from Shelley and Okay.
No.
It's a very interesting scene. Again, the meta angle to me is that dispute again between reading into things versus not reading into things.
Yeah.
That Andy is just speaking plainly about walking a lot on foot, and Truman's trying to look for codes when there isn't. But otherwise, I have nothing to say on that.
I think that I have a few things to say about this entire sheriff station, if you will. So I think that trying to wait out for Bernie the Mule is something that's going to only go so far, dependent on how we all can come together and work out this big crime thing. And while Truman, as well as Andy, are just sitting by, like, waiting for some news to come by, we get Lucy, actually, to appear inside the movie again. Again, more fan service claps, yay! But we have Lucy sort of contact Truman, saying that, oh, wait, I'm sorry, Truman, Mrs. Packard, I think it was still Mrs. at the time, Mrs. Packard called.
Well, no, her husband would be dead.
Okay, dead husband. So Miss Packard called and said that there's some sort of creature sort of lurking out there in the woods.
Well, she heard what sounded like a prowler.
Right, like a
Prowler
prowler.
is usually a person.
Prowler is a person usually? Okay.
It's Lucy that goes to the jump of it being raccoon.
Yes, so whether it's a person or raccoon or a raccoon
Easily-
of a man,
easily
we see
mixed up.
Truman gets up and he's got to take care of this duty.
Yes.
It doesn't matter how important and how long he's been planning out this mission. No, he's got to check that out and save Miss Packard.
They literally, if there is a burglar or like a dangerous person at the sawmill, then the police are called. They're not going to be like,
Kalil?
Sorry, no.
Kalil.
No, the police have
I
to
get
go.
that. There's other policemen. There's other people
I
they
mean,
can call upon.
are
There
there?
actually are in the
Are
background.
there?
We've seen them.
Eh.
It's the fact that Truman specifically has to go for it.
Oh,
and
well, you know why
it's
he wants to
Miss
go.
Packard, exactly.
It's chosen.
There's a prowler, and it's a 2B prowler. It's going to
And
be
Truman, it
little
can't let anything
sneak
happen.
raccoon of a man, Truman, walking up, sneaking up to the window,
Oh, no.
and saying, "Hello there, Josie."
Oh, good job. You didn't call her honk.
But there is that sort of like dealing with the matter. It shows a lot on Truman's character, but there's also that sense that with like as Lucy sort of trails off more and more and more and more and doesn't realize
About
that
her aunt in Wyoming.
and how Truman's not going to listen to all of it and gets shocked on it. Fun moment. We get the moment again, kind of, in which Andy kind of like wants to come over and see Lucy, it seems. And they both shock each other into a scream that may have transitioned nicely into a scene. Hey, Kalil, where would be the best point to put the Lucy scream?
I wouldn't put this one in Firewalk with me, just to clarify. I will say, however, very cryptically, the moment where Lucy freaks out about someone appearing when she thinks she's talking to them and communicating to them, it helped me understand something about Lucy that didn't make sense to me before that appears in something we haven't covered yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Listener,
You have just like said, here you go. This could be a sandwich. I don't know. It's bread right now. Thank you, Kalil.
Listener, I hope you're able to take the bread I left you, the breadcrumbs, and follow it to the trail I'm implying that there is a scene that invokes a similar idea, kind of almost sort of not really. I can't say how it's similar, but with Lucy's character in something we haven't covered yet, that to me felt weirdly out of character, but now I'm like, oh, okay, there's a little bit of a precedent here.
And as far as things go that do not have any precedent, why don't we go ahead and just like answer the phone and see how Dr. Jacoby is doing?
So we talked about...
No, that's it. That's all we have to say about this. We're done. That's the summary.
I won't say much. I just, this is one character we talked about, before, like, what if they had a scene? And I didn't know when I said that he did have a deleted scene, a missing piece.
Uh-huh.
I'm glad this wasn't included. And I kind of want to consider this one not canon in the sense that I like how the original show always implied that Jacoby's relations with Laura might have been more than professional.
This one...
Less than professional?
Yeah.
Just not professional.
And this is why I enjoyed this being canon, because it's like, it's almost as if he's just like desperate. He's got to get his fix of Laura.
Well,
he's like calling out her, just being like, hey, what about tapes? Like, I already sent you 2 tapes.
I really
Why
prefer
didn't you
not
contact
knowing
me?
that.
Why didn't you contact me? It's like, it's Johnny Horn's birthday. I'm not entirely on your end of life. You can't help yourself until you just try to do this. It's like, God damn it, Jacoby. He's like, send me a kiss.
The send me a kiss line is so damning.
Is so I don't see how someone can like look into like the missing pieces and then go back, presuming it's a canon point, and then look back at Jacoby in any sense of a positive light.
Well, because we get the creepy moments where he's fingering the hula girl tie.
Yeah,
right?
that's creepy.
We get the moments where Cooper's asking, like, hey, were you one of the men that Laura slept with this night? And he being like, haha, no. But, like, we get this little, like, okay.
Yeah.
How invested in Laura was Jacoby physically?
Jacoby.
How?
Your problem.
And I liked not knowing. I liked the mystery of it being really unclear if Jacoby's just a really creepy guy who did not have sex with Laura, or if he is a guy who had sex with Laura and has trouble hiding it. I like not knowing which way it went. And this implies at least the sense of physicality.
It supplies not necessarily sense of physicality, but more so playing into the fantasy, as if he is calling someone on the flesh world, but he is somewhat of a more personal thing. Yeah. And it doesn't help that it's being in the framework of someone who could have potentially helped Laura. Again, we've had this issue before, and this does not help. This does not put Jacoby any better on the tier list.
On the TEAR list.
Yes.
On the crying.
On the crying. He's still at the point where I have to cry a lot. So, but as far as tiers go, Kalil, I got bad news. We said before we weren't going to make this into an 8-part series. Now, it is divisible much lower, I think. I think that we can still get this done in about 2 parts. But I think we should take a moment to just rest. Let us settle into our minds. And also get Jacoby out of our heads.
I want him out of my coconut.
You want him out of your coconut? What does that mean, Kalil?
Get him out of my coconut.
So, Kalil, as far as a wonderful and strange question of the week goes. Now, for a wonderful, strange question of the week. And Kalil, I am taking the reins on this one because we didn't expect to put it in part, but that does not matter. So tell me, Kalil, as far as this question of the week goes, if you could have another character in Twin Peaks appear in Fire Walk with Me, their prequel, per se, which character would you want to see more of?
So someone who is not in the missing pieces?
Someone not in the missing pieces, someone who is not present throughout the film, but you want to see a little bit more of the time before Laura Palmer kind of, didn't exist. Well, she does exist, but dead. I went for the dead thing.
Well, we already established before that 2 prominent characters who are missing from the narrative were Benjamin Horne and Johnny.
Now you have to combat them. Like, we have Johnny Horne's birthday in the missing pieces,
yeah.
But who do you want to see more in the missing pieces in this case?
That's what I'm saying, though, is that those are the 2 that connect most to Laura.
Yes.
So if I'm going to bring Laura into the scene, those are the most obvious ones. You could do something with Audrey, but Audrey and Laura weren't really friends.
Yeah.
But they knew each other. So there's a sense in which you could probably do something there. But I'm going to bring back a character that I think was woefully missed. And that's Toad. I would ask for the Toad cut right now.
Toad cut.
So it was between him and Spinning Locker Man. I was going back and forth in my head. But I think that you bring back Toad at the diner. And so what happens is we have the diner scene with Norma and Nadine and Ed. We bring that one in, right? I told you we're going to extend that and bring it back in. But then when everyone's sad and there's all loneliness and darkness, then Toad enters and he says, "Where's my axe? I'm hungry." And we just bring it all full circle in there.
A brilliant, a very artistic position, and I'm sure it would fit in absolutely any point of the film. I'm going to be a little selfish here and see if I can try to pull you into my side. There are multiple takes inside of this missing pieces in which we actually do hear 2 instances of Johnny Horne's birthday. Yes. I think that a scene with Laura Palmer with Johnny Horne's birthday thematically could potentially fit into the movie itself, and not only kind of like aid in some of these spare pieces, but let's just face it. Not only do I want to see this actor stretch some acting chops on like being himself. He's mainly been an absent present. I want to see what happens with Laura Palmer, but he was very strong in Laura's influence in the book. That hey, honestly, like let's go to a birthday party with Johnny Horne, see what that even looks like, especially with how much money kind of goes into the Horne family.
Okay. I'll meet you in the middle. Okay. We go to Johnny Horne's birthday and Toad's there. He's one of the guests at the birthday party.
Okay.
He just came for the cake.
Yep.
And the punch. The delicious Horne family punch.
Keep going. Keep giving it to me.
I'm thinking that everyone brings gifts for Johnny. Toad comes in. He didn't really know what to get, so he packed up one of the sandwiches, the double R. He wrapped it up in like wrapping paper and then put it in a box, and it's just like room temperature. It's been sitting in his house for a day, just sitting in room temperature.
Yes.
He gives it to Johnny Horne.
Okay. Then what happens?
Laura Palmer eats it, and that's how she dies.
Oh.
It was never Bob.
Take.
It was not Bob at all.
Oh, no. Well, you're here to hear, folks. It was Toad all along, and we should have seen it coming, the way that he looks behind Shelley and everything like that. We've solved Twin Peaks, everyone, and I look forward to more solutions next week as we go deeper into the missing pieces.
Honk, honk.